Okay, everybody. Well, look, it is 9:30 by my clock watch. So, Borida, Peter Pub, welcome to this Trust Board of the Welsh Ambulance Service. As always, we have a full house, a few new names to say hello to. So, warm welcome to Johnny Sammett, who's joined us for the first board meeting as our new Director of Digital. So, very warm welcome to you. And also just to acknowledge that, Leanne, this is probably your last attendance as a board member here, but a huge thank you for having stepped into the interim role in the digital space for a long time, since August of 22, apparently. So huge thank you for doing that. And it's been a trying time, to say the least. So we owe you a huge debt, and thank you very much for all that you've done. And a warm welcome to Johnny. So we have a couple of apologies today. We have apologies from Damon from the trade unions and apologies from Kevin, who is on holiday. Kerry, you've made it, just with the traffic, that's grand. Hannah's remote, and we've checked the signal, so we know she's there. So welcome to you, Hannah, on the remote. We don't have any British Sign Language today, apparently, due to ill health, so unfortunately we're not able to do British Sign Language. And just a reminder to everybody of sensitive microphones. The programme is being recorded, and obviously people can be watching if they wish to, as it is a meeting in public. A couple of things about governance, which I always say, but I'll just take the opportunity to say it for anybody who's watching for maybe the first time, that this board is completely accountable for governance, but the governance of the trust is a large and complicated affair, which is largely delegated to committees, and it's not the purpose of this board to repeat the work of the committees, but it is the purpose of this board to ensure that the committee work has been done. So what we hear during the course of this morning will be through a variety of means, AAA reports and feedback from committee chairs. We hear and take assurance that the committees have done the work of detailed, in-depth assurance and scrutiny, and that any matters of significant concern are then raised through either the minutes or through the AAA reports or through the verbal feedback during the course of this meeting. But it's not, as I say, the purpose of this board to repeat all of that work all over again. The other thing to mention is that at the end of this meeting, we've got reports from the committees, and contained within those reports, we've got committee reports. We've got 5 different reports, annual reports of various sorts, 2 of which have to be formally approved by this board, and 3 of which are just here for note, really. So I think that's probably all I need to say by way of introduction. So we'll kick off. Under declarations of interest, just need to check if there are any declarations of interest anybody wishes to make related to items on the agenda or otherwise. And that appears not to be the case. That's excellent. Under the minutes of the previous meeting, can we just check that everybody is content that they are an accurate record and that we can approve those minutes? Thank you very much. Under the action logs, there were only 2 items, one related, I think, to infection control, which I think is probably now closed. We're dealing with that later in terms of feedback, and the other was just a confirmation the letter had been sent to the attendees who joined us for the staff story last time, and that was done. So those 2 track matters, I think, if we're content with that, have both been completed. Under the chair's report, the only thing I would just mention for the record is that the non-exec team and the executive team met recently as part of the Insights programme looking at individual styles. The executive team had a meeting and dealt with that on their own. The non-execs, we did that also on a different occasion, and for the first time in that programme, we came together as a group to share our kind of knowledge and understanding, and hopefully to assist in working collaboratively as a unitary board. So that's what I wanted to say. So I think, unless there's any other comments, any questions anybody has of me, we'll go straight to item 6 and to Chief Executive.
Great, thank you, Colin. So just as usual, a couple of points I'll draw out from the report, and then happy to take any questions on it. In addition to the points I will draw out, I just want to start by perhaps with 2 things that aren't necessarily covered in detail in the report. Firstly, colleagues on the board and indeed across the organisation and some members of the public may have seen a short, well, I say short, 9-minute video that we did last Sunday. This was to look back really at the last 5 years of progress in the organisation. I used the opportunity of my anniversary being here in this role for 5 years to do that, but also to look forward to what we're going to need to do
in the next 5. Now, some colleagues across the organisation may disagree with the perspective that I've offered in that video, but of course, what it was seeking to do, or is seeking to do, is recount all of the work, some of the work, not all of the work, that we collectively as an organisation have done, and the progress that we've made despite a number of let me describe it as lumps and bumps along the way. In addition to the report, I just draw colleagues' attention also to the recent Sun Who Cares Wins Awards, where our Wish Service team picked up the Best Team Award, and Mark Harris on behalf of the organisation, but particularly those staff who give their time to deliver that Wish Service, collected the award from the Prime Minister on the evening. That was televised on Channel 4 Sunday just gone, so that was great to see. The report does talk about accredited Centre of Excellence being gained for the use of ECNS, and yesterday we received that award from the International Academy of Emergency Dispatchers at the Navigator Conference for the UK and Ireland, taking place in Cardiff yesterday and today. They've got the largest attendance they've ever had, UK and Ireland Navigator here in Cardiff today, with over 150 people from UK MPDS user ambulance services there. And of course, the board will be familiar with the fact that we're the first ambulance service to use ECNS in the way that we are, with paramedics doing so. And then the other 2 awards that we picked up yesterday, one of our colleagues, Kelly, picked up EMD of the Year award at the Navigator Conference, and Tom from the ECNS implementation team also picked up an award for his work in leading the implementation of ECNS. So quite a few awards coming in thick and fast for the work that our people have been doing in the last couple of weeks. And of course, we've got the ALF conference taking place next week, again in Cardiff for the first time, with the largest ever attendance that the ALF conference has had, with over 400 people registered to attend that. So back to the report, if I can, and take us to paragraph 49. So this is referencing the RAPID 2 trial. Particularly pleased to see this because this talks about further opportunities for pain relief to be provided to a particular group of patients. Paragraph 52 talks about more awards, and this is the HSJ Awards and a couple of our people being shortlisted as finalists for the HSJ Awards, particularly in relation to the work that's been going on with palliative care. And then the final area I just want to draw out on this occasion from the report is at paragraph 62 and 63, which relate to the volunteer conferences that have been underway. The first of those has taken place. The second is to follow in a couple of weeks. Really good attendance at the first one in North Wales. And really good feedback coming in from those volunteers from both the car service and the community first responder group that attended, and we've got the second one of those coming up in Swansea in the next couple of weeks. And then the second point here I just want to draw the board's attention to is that Angie and the team have been working to redefine or reshape what were exit interviews, but into moving on interviews to understand in more granular detail the reasons why people choose to leave the organisation, and therefore enable us to respond to the themes which emerge from those. So a more in-depth exit interview process now in place to understand reasons why and learning that we can draw from those themes. So I'll stop there, Chairman, but happy to take any questions on the report. Thanks very much. So questions, yes, indeed, Paul.
There's a lot in your report, Jason, around capital and estates, and I was just wondering on para 33, which is the South East Fleet Workshop, or what's the plan for Blackware when it's decommissioned? And there's also another issue in here about Monmouth and the cost issues. So I was just wondering whether you or
Chris probably
give us some feedback on those.
Yep. So in terms of Blackware, it's not our site; it's a leased site. So we hand it back to the landlord. Hopefully by the end of next week. The move has been slightly delayed in terms of the workshop from Blackware and Blackwood moving into Merthyr, but that's scheduled to start on Monday. Merthyr has been used for the commissioning unit. It used to be based in Caerphilly. They've been in there there since July. But once Blackware is vacated by the end of next week, the plan is to hand the keys back to the landlord, which is a bit of a complicated one because I think it's a sub lease arrangement with both Cardiff City Council and Cardiff University involved, but it's not ours, and we will hand it back to the owners and completely vacate the site. It's quite a high topical one every time I have a conversation with government colleagues from a capital perspective, where the first thing they ask me is when we're off the Blackware site, because clearly the significant investment over 2 facilities here and Merthyr that they've put into the organisation to get us off that site. Monmouth, it is a challenging one. Monmouth, I am going to have to admit, it's a challenging one with spiralling costs and the size of the site, because it's significantly bigger. Our current site, is the actual footprint and the old building is significantly bigger than what we need for the area currently. So we're continuing to explore opportunities for collaboration with Gwent Police and South Wales Fire and Rescue. So that work's ongoing. The cost of that, though, isn't necessarily overly affordable currently either in the current context. So I have to be honest about, sort of some concerns about our ability to deliver what we need to do there. So we may have to come back with a plan B or a plan C at some point, but we are trying to push forward, particularly the collaboration approach, because despite that being more than a budget that we would have assumed for it, it's probably better value for money than maybe us trying to do something on our own.
That's good. Thanks, Jeff.
Good. Any other questions, Sue? Yes, Gary.
Thank you. So as always, Jason, there's lots of positive progress in this report. I'd just like to highlight from my perspective the level of engagement and work around the inclusive culture. So we talked about it after the people plan, and so it's really good to see that. But 2 questions, one on point 23. So I appreciate this is a difficult question, but do you think the financial pressures facing the NHS in Wales are going to impact on that partnership and collaboration that seems so important for us in terms of different initiatives? And then my second question was on point 71, which was the Bevin Commission work that's currently being undertaken on consulting with the public on the future of services across health and social care. I just wondered, because of conversations we've had, have we had any opportunity to influence some of the, those themes those discussions with the public? And will we maybe have access to some of that data that might help us with our conversations around strategy?
Okay, thanks, Kerry. I'll deal with the first one on the kind of risk of collaboration first, and then perhaps Liam or other colleagues might want to pick up, perhaps Estelle as well, the Bevin Commission question. I mean, look, there is a risk. Of course, there's a risk that that the current financial pressures facing the rest of the NHS will impact the collaborative work we need to do. That said, we do have really positive dialogue going on with a couple of health boards at the moment about different aspects of collaboration, the things we need to do differently. So just a couple of examples, the work that Liam's been leading on Connected Support Cymru is gaining momentum with a couple of health boards, particularly around how we can manage patients differently and hold patients safely in the community. And then there's also good dialogue going on around the provision in a couple of health board areas around mental health, a dedicated specific mental health response. So I think, yes, of course there's a risk, but equally, we have good positive dialogue in a number of areas currently underway, and there isn't a signal really that that's at risk. If anything, I think it's recognised that where we've got high volume areas of patient cohorts that we can manage differently in a safe way, that is better for us, better for the system, and therefore health boards are engaged in it. So I'm not too concerned at the moment, but inevitably, of course, there is a risk. But I think we've got reasonable progress at the moment. And on the Bevin Commission piece, I don't know whether Estelle or Liam, you want to comment on that.
If I can pick up also the first point about the collaboration, Kerry, because Rachel and I sit on virtually all the RPBs in Wales now, and certainly I was at Cardiff and Vale RPB on Monday, And there's been a very clear discussion about concerns around this, both, not just the pressure on NHS budgets, but the pressure across the public sector, and how that presents a risk of organisations actually retrenching from collaborative work, because your gut instinct is to, pull back from that, when actually what you need to do is be more expansive and more collaborative, because that's the only way you're going to get the better bang for the buck. So there was certainly a commitment at Cardiff, and I know in North Wales, where I'm the vice chair, of as far as possible trying to maintain not only the current collaborative projects that are ongoing in RPB land, if I can put it that way, with statutory partners and the third sector, but also to try to maintain those moving forward, recognising that this year's tough, but next year is equally, if not more tough. So just to assure you that there are conversations going on in the RPB fora around that collaborative work. Just on the Bevin Commission work, Rachel, myself, colleagues from PECI, etc., did meet with the Bevin Commission, probably about a month ago now, to discuss how we could input into that work. It is work that is supported by Welsh Government, but not commissioned by Welsh Government. I think they're keen to hear the outcome of it. We are aware of what sort of scenarios, questions will be posed to the public. Our colleagues from PECI will be attending, but my own view is we keep it quite low key in terms of attendance and active input, because the purpose of the conversation is to talk about a potential future state for the NHS. What do people think is the art of the possible moving forward? How could it look in another 20, 30 years? There is a risk that if all the statutory bodies are there from the NHS, it'll degenerate into a conversation about how it is currently and what the current pressures are like, and we'll end up trying to field questions about people's experiences of services now. So there's a balance between listening, hearing, helping that inform our own engagement work around our own transformation journey, and trying not to muddy the waters with today's pressures, if you see what I mean. So yes, we're present and engaged, but slightly one step removed in listening mode. And I know the PECI team will be bringing some of that intelligence into us, so that we understand what members of the public and others are saying in those fora.
I know that Liam wants to come in, and also Rachel. So
just building on the comment around collaboration, the scale of the challenge that we have across Wales for the rest of this financial year and going into the subsequent ones is going to be really quite challenging. And I think actually the things I would kind of layer in is alongside the work that we're doing, that that Estelle and Jason have outlined on specific projects, specific kind of partnerships at a national level. Our hope is that we will see really effective quality impact assessments that are being completed across the country, where there is an alignment to those QIAs at a central level that allow us to kind of align what we're doing as health boards and as an ambulance service, and obviously with Valindra and others. But I think that will be quite important. The need for really effective value-based healthcare analysis that looks at the outcomes that we're achieving for the amount of money being spent, and ensuring that those align will be important. And as Jason was speaking, I was reflecting actually on the meeting that Andy, Brendan and I were at a week or so ago with the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, and really understanding clinical risk and actually understanding how we're going to manage risk across systems and across the country. So I think collaboration and partnership will be under considerable challenge. I don't think it's going to be an easy period, but I think if we can hold our kind of North Star, if you like, to value-based healthcare, quality impact assessments and system and national level risk, then we'll have the right incentives to build on the collaboration that we've got already.
Thanks, Liam. Rachel?
Yeah, it was just a small point on the Bevin Commission. They are anticipating potentially different phases of work. So this is an initial phase, and we have talked to them about how subsequent phases may focus on different parts of the service, and they're quite interested in working with us on what something might look like in terms of some of our services. So we've actually got a meeting, I think, coming up, Jason and I, with the lead on not just on this, but on kind of wider strategy stuff and how they might help us. So I think there's some possibilities emerging there as well.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Kerry, thank you very much. Any other point to. I just wondered, Jason, whether you wanted to say a few words about the Test of Change programme, the Perfect Day, which we've done one of. We're doing another one in October.
I mean, Andy's probably closer to talk about that, Colin. Yeah, by all means.
Yeah, sure. So proving really interesting, and it's good to see each of these tests of change developing one upon the other and taking the learning forward. So, for example, one of the things we've been looking at within that test of change is maximising the productivity of the APPs and what that tasking model is. So moving from utilisation within the 60s on the first one, taking the learning forward, utilisation was now right up there towards 80%, so really good. And then mixing that with the impact from reducing conveyance to the ED, with 87% on the second day of the test of change. So there's lots of lessons coming out that will then keep building up to 3. I just received, I haven't managed to read it yet, the plan for test of change number 3, which is going to start on next week. So there will be the third one then. And then again, we'll start planning for the next one.
Good, excellent. I think the more we can talk about that in the public domain is a good thing, because it's the empirical evidence that's supporting the whole case for a change of culture within the ambulance service. So, and it's really good to see that as that progresses, we're seeing more and more evidence, which is supportive of the documents that were written way back in 2019 in terms of vision. And actually, on the sort of following points, probably also, I suspect, to you, Andy, but I'll mention to Jason first, on whether it's worth just saying a few words about the improvements in return of spontaneous circulation, because that's a really, really good news story.
Yeah, Andy.
Yeah, most definitely. It's been our aspiration for a while to start to turn the tide on that one, because it has been quite a stubborn element to change. But obviously, the significant amount of work we did last year in terms of resetting things and changing the focus really start to paint evidence. You'll see the performance later on when we get to the MIQ PCR to illustrate as to where we're up to. I've just checked in with the team this morning. What's it looking like for September? Still looking at, we've got that positive continued growth for September as well, albeit with a few days left. So, I remain really optimistic that we've turned the corner and we keep pushing through. But the thing, the only kind of little caveat I would put the board aware of is these are low numbers of people, so it doesn't take much to alter that as a percentage, because the actual number of incidents of these, 2, 3, 4 of those will drop as a couple of percent.
I mean, just to build on that, Colin, if I can briefly, I think it's important to hang on to this as an important kind of quality improvement that is starting to come through, because despite, we talk about, immediately life-threatening patients, and we'll see it, as Andy says in the MIQPR later, the performance in terms of percentage remaining challenging, very challenging. We are getting to more patients more quickly in volume terms than we ever have before, because of the increase in the gross number of patients we're seeing in that category. So more people are getting a response in 8 minutes than ever have before, despite the percentage being off. And the other thing that's coming through is the quality or the outcome improvement, as Andy's spoken to. So the changes that we've made, rosters, CHARU, some adjustments to how we're responding to work are starting to pay off, because we're getting more patients more quickly in volume terms, and we've got outcome improvements coming through as well.
Good. Okay.
Just to build on that, I messaged Rachel last night about the MIQPR and the issue about percentage not reflecting actually a lot of the quality improvement. So we'll continue that dialogue. But I was particularly looking at red performance, where the percentage is low, but actually the numbers that we're seeing is higher.
Much higher.
So it doesn't reflect the service that we are delivering. So we'll have further discussions, Rachel and I, informally around that.
Okay, just a quick check then. If anybody else got anything, Hannah's okay, all okay. Fine. Good. Okay, thanks. Thanks very much, Jason. So Estelle, I think next item to your questions to the public, if there are any.
And in fact, there are not,
There are
Chair.
not.
And yesterday, as some colleagues will know, we had our annual general meeting where there were quite a number of questions from the public. So I think hopefully we've exhausted that for this week, and look forward to a bumper crop at the next board meeting.
Good. Okay, excellent. And the opportunity then, if anybody's watching this or watches the recording of this, if you want to ask questions, please do. There's mechanisms to put questions to the board, and then we attempt to answer them as best we can at the next board meeting. Okay, in that case, we come on to staff story, item number 8. So I think, Alex, you've got to connect up the external contributor. Indeed. Okay, we'll just take a couple of minute break then whilst we gather the appropriate people together. We're running slightly ahead of schedule. And whilst we're waiting, perhaps I'll just make that general comment, really just reinforcing what Paul was saying, that we are, of course, reporting on a lot of data, which we have to report on, but sometimes that data doesn't truly reflect actually what's going on in terms of the patient. So things like, we agonize about whether we arrive within 8 minutes or 9 minutes. We agonize about abandonment rates and things in the call centres and so on. But actually those kind of figures, whilst they're important, they don't necessarily tell you the story about what's going on with the patients who are receiving the treatment. And if a patient's life is received by an ambulance crew that arrive in 9 minutes, that's probably something to celebrate, rather than getting too worried about the fact that we were a minute late arriving, if you see what I mean. It's a very delicate and complicated issue to try to find the right things to measure and what you publicize or what you really shine a light on or what you don't. And we need to get underneath the numbers sometimes. Okay, how are we doing, Alex?
Bethan, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, good stuff.
Oh, excellent. Good. Thank you, Matt. So Bethan's joining us online. There you are. Hello, Bethan. Welcome.
Morning.
So Steve is here. So welcome. 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 Are you going to introduce it, Steve, or is somebody else going to introduce it? It's Liam. Liam. Okay.
So thank you, everybody. So welcome, Bethan and Steve. We've got a presentation coming through from Bethan and Steve on work they've been doing for pre-hospital maternity care. And the two things I just wanted to flag in advance. The first is that this work is part of a national programme of improvement. And colleagues who were here before myself may recognise that there was a very strong push from within the Welsh Ambulance Service to secure resourcing from within the maternity neonates programme and ensure that our dimension of healthcare was also getting the opportunity to improve. There are a couple of things that sit behind it in terms of the national funding that we received, and Bethan and Steve will talk to that, a lot of that work over the next few minutes. But there is a strategic ambition that sits within this as well, which is, I think, really important for us when we think about our clinical strategy. And that is to think about how we might have a 24/7 maternity labour line within the country, and how WASP may be positioned to support that. And what that does is it brings into sharp relief the wants for Wales use of clinical expertise to support clinicians and patients across the country. And that's a real driver from a wider lens of our clinical strategy to supporting. So the work that Bethan has been doing, I think, has been pretty exceptional in kind of leading that as coming in as a specialist clinician from outside. And demonstrating what is possible in that hosted seconded environment without necessarily having to go directly into the employment and having everything all in one place. And I think what it's also done, well, I know what it has also done is flag across the system the role that we are playing. So when I have conversations with EDON colleagues outside, when we talk about the directors of, the heads of midwifery, the directors of midwifery in the work that they're doing, there is a very direct relationship now that comes back to us in a way that I don't believe existed before. So there's some really positive stuff there that Bethan is now going to lead us on.
Oh, thank you very much, Liam. Bore da, everyone. Sorry I can't be with you in person. As Jason mentioned earlier, I'm actually at the Navigator conference. So my name is Bethan Johnson, as Liam said. So I am part of the perinatal safety support programme that is currently running in Wales. So I just first like to talk about how my role came about. So some may be aware that over the last 10 years, maternity and neonatal services across the UK have been subjected to significant scrutiny. This is where numerous instances where standards of care were not met, and this has been in case reviews, high-profile media reporting. So Improvement Cymru were asked by the Welsh Government to support a diagnostic phase of maternity and neonatal services in Wales. So this was going to identify how we could improve the experiences of the outcomes of maternity and perinatal care. So this was following from our own national report in Cymraeg Morgannwg. So following the learning from that, there was a clear commitment from our Chief Nursing Officer, Sue Tranker, and our Chief Midwifery Officer, Karen Jewell, to improve quality of maternity and neonatal services in Wales. So this is a very exciting place to be working in, with women and children at the heart of our programme. Can I have the next slide, please, Anne? So I just thought I'd just give a little summary about the Maternity and Neonatal Safety Support Programme. And the purpose of the programme is to ensure that we have clear and consistent improved approaches to maternity and neonatal safety in Wales. So each health board has a local maternity and neonatal champion, and myself, the perinatal champion within WAST. So we all have the same key driver: to improve the safety, experience and outcomes of maternity and neonatal care, and to provide support to enable teams to deliver a high quality healthcare experience for pregnant people, babies and families across maternity and neonatal care. So within the report, the UK, so I think that this is really important that now we highlight that this is the first report in the UK that actually has a shared focus of improving perinatal care in maternity. So the first part of the programme was a diagnostic phase, and this was done with an appreciative inquiry focusing on existing strengths to identify the key priorities for service improvements to ensure the quality of high standard care that every woman, a birthing person and their families deserve. So during the diagnostic phase within WAST, I spent time listening to staff while learning and observing our organisation. On reflection, this was a really powerful time, like having that dedicated time where I could just sit and listen to our staff and learn. Like, I'm probably never going to get that in any job again, where you've got that dedicated time just to learn the service and how people feel with their service. So while improving the services for women and pregnant people and their families, this was also important for us to be able to listen to the staff to ensure that we are doing the best thing by the staff, because they are the ones that need to deliver the care. Coming from a work environment within a hospital, it became clear very quickly that this was a diverse, complex area where social deprivation and inequalities are amplified. And I think this then amplifies why it's so important, why WAST are involved in this National Improvement Programme. Can I have the next slide, please, Alan? Oh, thank you.
Bevin, can I just try to interrupt you, just to let you know that we're having difficulty seeing the slides here, actually inside. It's no bad thing, because it means we're actually concentrating on what you're saying, which is a really good thing. I think the slides are probably visible externally, but they're not actually visible to us. So just so you know, at the moment, we're watching and listening to you attentively, but we're not actually able to see the slides.
Okay. So I can share the slides later if that'd be helpful, but they don't contain much.
I think that's great, and it's an object lesson to us all, because we're attentively listening to you rather than reading the slides. So people know my feeling about this.
So
please carry on.
I'll explain a little bit about what's on this slide. So this slide is just an infographic that shows how maternity touches WAST. So the first picture on the slide is just showing that approximately 8 out of 10 women make a call to the 999 service. This slide's also got the QR code if anyone would like the report that was submitted to Welsh Government this year and released into the public domain. So I can share that widely if it is needed after. So this was not an investigation, but a review of the current services and the purposes for improvement. We are currently about to go into phase 2 of the report. So Welsh Government, NHS executives, groups, health boards and trusts, and any current stakeholders will all meet for a clear focus on what phase 2 looks like, looking at the 143 recommendations from the report. So just briefly highlighting how maternity touches WAST. So in a 12-month period last year, there were 2,500 999 calls with pregnancy-related emergencies. So this is a very small proportion of what we deal with on a whole within WAST. But for the pregnant population, this equates to 10% of pregnant women are ringing 999. So this is where my first had a key focus on non-visual medicine and pre-arrival instructions. So as I mentioned earlier, I spent some dedicated time in the control room, listening to calls, learning the very complex system, supporting active maternity calls, and also listening to calls from patient safety incidents that had been shared with us. So as you can imagine, the pregnancy protocol is very complex. So after submitting several processes for change to the IAD Academy, this led me to be invited to the clinical focus groups with the Academy. So I attended 3 clinical focus groups with the Academy, and it's absolutely fascinating to see that how much maternity miscarriage is now discussed in these meetings, which can only mean improvements for the protocol. So from these meetings, I was then asked to join the IAD Obstetrica Council. So we met just earlier this week, Sunday and Monday, to review Protocol 24. And I'm pleased to say it was a very successful meeting, and Protocol 24 is going to be evolving to the best version that it can be, and I think it's a very exciting space to be. So the other infographic, which I appreciate you can't see, is the women that use our NHS 111 service. So in the same 12-month period, there were 6,000 calls to NHS 111 Wales. So these were all for pregnancy-related problems. So this is about 20% of our pregnant population are contacting 111 Wales. So working with Dr. Mike Brady, our consultant clinician in 111, and colleagues at Cardiff University, we started to interrogate this data a little bit further. But it was clear from looking at this data that we knew very little about what the drivers and the experiences are from the women that are using this service. So we have submitted a proposal to the National Institute for Health and Care Research to explore these drivers and experiences further. And it is felt very strongly that the results of this research could not just tell us about our service, but also the services that women are using or not using, and then still coming to what NHS 111 Wales. I think it's really important that we also look at the findings may inform the development specification for the All Wales Maternity Advice Line, which Liam mentioned earlier, and also inform the improvements needed for Black, Asian and ethnic minority women that have a higher risk of dying in pregnancy. So this is just a slide outlining a high-level overview of some of the things that we've been doing. So we are currently waiting for phase 2 of the programme. We don't really know what that looks like yet, because that'll be decided between the NHS executive, the Welsh Government, what these recommendations are going to look like for Wales. So while that work is ongoing, we've been kept busy with the work that we've already highlighted in WAST and the improvement journey that we've already started. So training and experience in maternity and neonatal incidents is limited for WAST. So it's inevitable that with limited opportunities to practice their skills, the less confidence our clinicians will become in utilising their skill set when faced with a maternity or neonatal emergency. So within WAST, we have a workforce that is very committed and extremely enthusiastic about wanting to learn more about maternity, which is really great to see. So we listen to the staff, and Steve and I have worked very closely with the learning and development teams to introduce the new maternity model into the mandatory in-service training for this year. So all patient-facing staff, clinicians, which Steve will discuss a little bit further, will receive the mandatory training this year. So the mandatory training will help build on existing skills to empower our staff when dealing with maternity incidents, which in turn will ensure a high quality healthcare experience for all women, pregnant people, babies and their families that are using our services. I think it's important to highlight here that we are the first ambulance service to introduce this into the mandatory training. So we've really listened to our staff to know that this is what they want to learn more about and ensure that they get that training next year. So Prompt Cymru is a national mandatory training programme for midwives, and the Welsh Ambulance Service have worked closely with them for many years. So Steve was involved in the setup for this. So this is mandatory training that every midwife does, and this is all about obstetric emergencies in the community. So paramedics have been invited on this thing. We've actually got Steve is the paramedic faculty for Prompt Cymru. And the new programme this year has got a keen focus on improving communication with the 999 calls. So when looking in the diagnostic phase, it was clear that the EMDs have got an extremely difficult job, which is sometimes made a little bit more difficult with the communication breakdown of healthcare professionals ringing in. So there's a key focus on Prompt Wales this year, just explaining to midwives the roles of EMDs, the processes within WAST, and have an exemplar 999 call so that all midwives are familiar on how to make a 999 call. We're also working on the transfer document for Wales. So this is aiming to ensure that we have national standardised approach to transfers. We also want to make sure that we are avoiding any unnecessary transfers. So ensuring that if able, then the midwives can use taxis or UCSs rather than ringing 999, because in most instances we have low risk women in the community birthing with midwives. And sometimes an ambulance is not needed. It is just needed that they could have a UCS vehicle or even a taxi in some situations. We've done some maternity specific learning sessions for our non-visual medicine colleagues, and also supporting the clinical professional development for clinicians. We've also got representation on the National Working Group for the Maternity Early Warning Score chart. So this is one of the recommendations from the report. We don't know if this is going to be one of the main recommendations that are taken forward, but we have been proactive with this in ensuring that when the National Maternity Early Warning Score is implemented, that we have already scoped out how we're going to implement that in WAST into our digital systems. I've been supporting with expert opinion on patient safety incidents, and I think providing debriefs for staff on maternity and neonatal incidents has been well received by staff. These always seem to be the cases that the staff worry about. These are the ones that keep them awake at night. So just having that debrief for staff, I think, has been really helpful. I meet monthly with the maternity leads in all other ambulance services in the UK, which is really helpful because we can share themes, trends, or any barriers, and it's really good that they share a lot of learning with us that we can then implement into WAST. We have Digital Maternity Cymru is a really busy space right now. So this is a project to implement an all Wales digital system for maternity services. So this will be a huge benefit to women who have unified digital system. So we're currently working with DMC to ensure that there's seamless care through health boards and the Welsh Ambulance Service for women that are using our services. Liam did mention earlier about scoping for a 24/7 labour line and triage line. So that is one of the key recommendations from the MacNeo report, and we have already started scoping and visiting other areas just to make sure that if that comes back as one of the key recommendations that we are going to focus on for this year, then we are already done most of the work to be able to start implementing and get into the finer detail to be able to introduce. Great X. So I think I've been working with colleagues from the Welsh Ambulance Service and also the People and Culture Directorate to implement Great X. So Great X was something that we used to do in Cardiff and Vale, where I previously worked. And that is opposite of Data. So this is reporting, capturing positive events to improve safety, and by sharing excellence of our staff and also making our colleagues feel valued. So this could be anything from saying, thanks for making me a cup of tea when I come back from a call, or it could be thanking colleagues on a shift that you've had a difficult shift with. We have been lucky enough to secure the pilot of the newborn life support course. So this is the first course, pre-hospital newborn life support course. So that's very similar to Prompt Wales in the collaborative working. So this course is going to be run in Bangor on the 9th and 10th of November with paramedics, community midwives and our colleagues from EMIRT are all training together on newborn life support to get the research accreditation. Is Steve there? So I'm just going to introduce Steve now. So Steve is going to walk through some of the clinical improvements that we've been making.
Thank you, Bethan. So, Steve, over to you.
Yeah, my name's Steve. I'm the interim regional clinical lead consultant paramedic for Central and West. I've also got a keen interest in maternity care. I've been very fortunate enough to work with Bethan now for over the past year. When Bethan came on board, we got together and we thought we'd have a look at all this fantastic work that's going on behind the scenes. How does this translate to clinical practice and what we can do different? So we looked at our practice, looked at areas that we can improve, we can do differently, or we can just reinvigorate. So one of the first things we started looking at was thermoregulation. Now, pre-hospital thermoregulation has always been the forefront of ambulance care. We're very conscious of the environment we work in. We want to maintain warm environment for all of our patients. But as we looked into it deeper, it's really, really vital for newborn babies and more importantly, preterm babies. It's well researched and well evidenced for a newborn baby. Any 1 degree temperature drop below 36.5 adds a 28% mortality rate to this baby. So it's massive, and it's very easy for us to rectify if we go about it the right way. So we started looking at thermoregulation, and then we attended the launch of PreOps Cymru. So PreOps it's a national program looking at the management of preterm babies. And they have a passport, and there's 10 elements to this passport, and 3 of them really struck a chord with us, and it's things that we can make a positive difference to. The first one was optimum thermal regulation. The second one was the right hospital at the right time, and the third one is delayed cord clamping. So the first area we looked at was thermal regulation, and we were fortunate enough to be able to procure heat loss suits. So these are essentially purpose-made plastic suits that babies, cold, ill, or premature babies can go in, and it maintains thermal regulation through radiation. It captures all the warm air and moisture that's evaporating off the baby. So having those, we know we can keep the babies in the right environment for them to maintain normal thermia. These are specifically made for this job, and they have a Velcro fastening down the front. The reason we chose these particularly is that it allows us to keep the cord intact. We can delay cord clamping. We can also put in our monitoring devices either side of the baby, seal the baby up, wrap them in a blanket, use a radiant heat source, and we've got the baby at the optimum situation for normal thermia. So we were able to get those suits, and also it occurred to us that we don't have the right thermometers. We carry tympanic thermometers, but they're not really ideal for newborn babies, let alone premature babies. So we were able to, again, get hold of or procure enough axilla thermometers, so armpit thermometers, for every ambulance in WAST and every Charo vehicle. So we can monitor the babies, because WAST, like many other ambulance services, always worked on the principle that premature babies or newborn babies will always be cold. So we just need to warm them. We need to quantify that, and we need to be able to understand how effective our management is. Hence the reason why we've adopted the thermometers. So we've got heat loss bags, and we've got axilla thermometers. To support all that, we've generated a thermoregulation guidance to detail to our staff optimum procedure for maintaining thermoregulation of a newborn baby. We've linked in with the learning and development team, and we've created an e-learning package with multiple videos. And as Bethan mentioned earlier, we've we've got a MIST program where it's going to be hands-on. The guys can use this equipment, use these skills, and boost and maintain their confidence. As I said, we've always had thermoregulation at the forefront of our care, and we've been good at it, but we can be better, and we are going to be better. So this aligns to the first element of the PreOps passport. If I can have the next slide. Back in 2016, we created ambulance maternity action cards. They were based on our JR clinical practice guidance, but these were looking at some of the human factors rationale, borrowing some of the key elements of the aviation industry, and having checklists. So these are very simple checklists to ensure everything we're doing for maternal complications was the first one. Everything we're doing is correct and nothing gets missed. So we had the action cards, and myself and Bethan have started to revisit the action cards, make them better, more comprehensive, but also the clinical practice guidance has changed slightly. So we're making it current and making it correct information. On top of that, we've added an action card for care of the newborn. I know it seems simple, but to have the things and the key points in the checklist to make sure the little things, turning the heating on in the back of the ambulance, making sure thermoregulation, the little things that seem commonplace that can get missed in the heat of the moment. It's very clear to us that delivering babies can be a very rewarding element of ambulance practice, but it's something that doesn't happen very often, let alone when the complications happen. It is very infrequent. For some of the maternal complications, for some staff, it can be a once in a career opportunity. So having a checklist, making sure nothing gets missed, just seemed right for us. The last document we included, and it's probably the one I'm most proud of. I'm really sad you can't see it at the moment. It's a preterm guidance document. So again, the 3 elements I mentioned from the peri-prem, this one is the right hospital at the right time. We've created a flowchart for staff to give them an understanding of what to do if they're dealing with a preterm birth. So which hospital, which speciality, and how to manage the situation. On the back, we've detailed the speciality units all over Wales, and we've got a map pinpointing where they all are, what the specialities are. So what does a SCABU do? What does a NICU do? Just so our staff who don't come across these jobs very often will know to get the baby to the right hospital at the right time. So that's the preterm guidance, and that is aligning as well to the peri-prem pre-hospital passport. So as Bethan mentioned, we've been linking in with Prompts Cymru, and I'm proud to say we have a paramedic faculty within Wales, and it's a monthly mandated course for midwives, but we've managed to get a paramedic faculty member on every course and paramedic delegates. PROMPT stands for Practical Obstetric Multi-Professional Training, and we are actually working multi-professionally with midwives, understanding each other's capabilities and limitations, and truly interprofessional working. And lastly, we're working on the mandatory in-service training for our staff. We want our staff to be as comfortable with maternity care as they can be. It's something that comes in infrequently. It can be very nerve-wracking, and it can be very stressful. So giving our staff an understanding of what to do, how to do it, and when to do it is the right thing for us to do. So Bethan's mentioned we've done a lot of collaborative working. We've worked with health board colleagues, we've worked with maternity colleagues, and I think the collaboration between myself and Bethan has been key to all this. A wise person once told me quite a poignant proverb. It's an African proverb, and it says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We've got a long journey ahead of ourselves, and I think we're going about it the right way together. So thank you, Jock. Happy to take any questions.
Well, for me, thank you both. A huge thank you, Beth and Steve, for giving up your time today. I'm sorry the slides didn't work, but I don't think you took anything away from it. And actually, it forced us to really concentrate on your words, Beth. And so that was very good. And speaking from somebody who's doesn't come from an ambulance industry, it's startling just what the high proportion of pregnancies that actually interact with the ambulance service, either through the ones or possibly through the nines, or even through an emergency ambulance attendant. So I think it's been really eye-opening, really interesting. So for me, thank you very much for giving up your time. It's been very worthwhile. Can I just look around and open up any questions? Bethan, I thought your hand would shoot up, so over to you, Bethan, best.
I was on pins to say something, honestly. Beth and Steve, thank you. I was getting really excited. This is not an area that I've got any depth of knowledge in, other than having 2 children of my own. But I got more and more excited as you both were speaking. The sort of things that were coming to my mind are things like, wow, it's all about innovation. it demonstrates just how important collaboration is in the wider sense and the impact that can have on the patient experience and the quality of service delivery. The other word that came across to me was about excellence, and we always want that and we always strive for that. And it's really refreshing to hear such positive work that's being undertaken, because as a board, we tend to spend a lot of our time talking about the challenges, of which there are very many, as we know. And it's just so wonderful to hear such good information being shared with us. There were lots of the things that you said. One of the sentences you said, Steve, was, we can be better and we are going to be better. I love that, because that said with such assertion, such confidence. And I've no doubt that that will be achieved, because I can see you are both driving that forward, coming from your very different perspectives with this. There were two questions from me, really. I could wax lyrical about this, but I won't. You'd be glad to hear. The first question was, is there anything else or anything more that we as a board or as WAST can do to help you drive forward this, you know, inspirational work that you're doing, the work that will have such huge positive impact on people? And secondly, I chair the Quality and Patient Experience Committee, and this is all about quality. This is all about excellence. This is all about patient experience. And I just wanted to ask that as you develop this further and this progresses, would it be possible for you to somehow bring something back to Quest in the future, where we can look at the impact of this on people's lives?
Bevin, you want to go first?
Yeah, so just with the first question, just so the support we have had from the board, from Liam, so Liam is the executive for the MatNeo programme, and the support that we have had, there's been comments from other maternity and neonatal champions just how fantastic the support we have. So I do feel that we've had all the support to drive this forward. So it's all because of the support that we've had, why this has been embedded and worked so well, so quick within the Welsh Ambulance Service. So I don't feel there's anything more that we can do. I think that we are getting all the support that we need.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just add to that, you know, echo what Bevin said. We've had so much support. Going back to my proverb, I love a proverb, but the reason we've gone so far is because we're doing it together.
And Bevin's other point was a call to perhaps come back to the Quest committee at some point in the future, and I'm sure you'll be very happy to do that as your work progresses.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Few hands coming up. We've got Ange down there. We've also got Liam, and we've also got Estelle, and we've got Hannah in the background there on the screen. So I've lost the order, but perhaps we go Angie first, and then we'll come around the table here and then up to the screen.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Bevin. Thank you, Steve. Just thank you for the shout out for people and culture, Bevin. Just to let you know, Bevin was recommended to me as someone who'd be an amazing champion for our culture change work, and she is. And I met with her and just thought, wow, we need to bottle that energy, infectious, you know, and commitment and passion about our people and our belief in our people. So now I'm going to obviously focus on Steve and get him into the community as well. But you mentioned, Bevin, the work you were looking at around Greatex, and I just wanted to say that recognition program, we are following it up. And again, you know, Bethan's view about we really should be valuing and celebrating the brilliant work of our people is just excellent. So thank you for coming, because I think it's really great for us to sort of see this amazing collaboration, because this is the way we want to go, isn't it? So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Angie. We'll just go around the table. It's the easiest way. I'm not sure of the order, so we'll just do it that way. So coming around the table, I think we're probably to Estelle next, and Tilly.
Thanks, Colin. Brilliant presentation, folks, so I won't rehearse that, but really good. I just had one question on cord clamping, and I know this is a bit technical, but I know in the past, certainly several years ago, we were under a lot of fire from some of the sort of midwifery groups, etc., about advice on home delivery, about clamping the cord with shoelaces and all this sort of malarkey. And you mentioned it about delaying cord clamping. So I was wondering, because you're at the Navigator conference, Bevin, as you've said, and you talked about working with them to work through the advice. I'm assuming there's going to now be a change in that advice, is there? Because I know that I say it's a few years ago now, pre-pandemic, but we were under quite a lot of fire for quite a sustained period of time on that.
I think when you mentioned shoelacing, you saw myself and Bethan twitch a little. Bethan, I'll hand over to Bethan for this one because she's been a massive driver in.
Yeah, and just for clarity, this wasn't our staff necessarily. This was people who found themselves at home and being talked through a
Well,
delivery.
this wasn't something specific to us. This was
No.
MPD.
Yeah.
So this was part of the script.
Yeah.
And I'll hand over to Bethan because I don't want to take her credit.
So as you just said, this isn't just specific to us in WAS. This is an international. So this is used in over 50 countries. So when speaking to the academy about this, and obviously relaying the evidence of why we need to promote delayed board camping. So it was only the UK that ever had a problem with it. So I can confirm that categorically the shoelace will be out by spring. So but that's gonna half the emails that I have now. So
Thanks, Bevin.
Lovely, thank you very much. Liam's going to go last, so we'll just go around the table to Jogger, and then we're going to come to you, Hannah, in a moment. Jogger next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you both for the presentation. It was really good. And a lot of positives that come out, and a lot's been said, so I won't repeat that, but a couple of things for me. Firstly is the really proactive approach you're taking. Initially, when he said the small number of patients we see as a service, you think, okay, but then when you mentioned that the percentage of women that are using this that are pregnant, that really put a different perspective. And sometimes it's great to see actually, not just from our perspective of who we serve, is from their perspective as well, the numbers. And then the other thing, Steve, when you mentioned about some of the simple things, doing a checklist. We talk about all this high tech, we talk about getting all this amazing kind of things in, but sometimes a straightforward checklist, the flow chart, it really helps staff to make them feel a bit comfortable, gives them a process to follow. So I just thought it's great that you guys seem to be covering all the bases, looking at it, not just from an innovation collaborative, but back to basics. What can we do the simple things right? So I thought that was really, really good to see that, you're looking at it holistically for the staff and for the patients. So great story. Thank you.
I think on that point, I think it's really important, exactly what Steve said, is that this is just a small part of what we're doing. So everything that we can do to make sure that human factors are covered when we are attending these maternity and neonatal calls, if that's as simple as a checklist to make sure that everything is done, then how easy would that be for our staff to make sure that when they go home, they know that they've done everything they need to be doing.
Good, thank you. And thank you, Joga. So I think then we're going to Hannah next.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you both very much for your comments and for that presentation. I was really heartened to hear that at various points in your presentation, you talked about pregnant people, because while we know that, again, if we look statistically at the proportion of our contacts that are pregnant people, they're relatively small, and it will be even smaller again, the number of contacts that we receive by people who are non-binary or potentially by pregnant trans men. And we know anecdotally that these groups are famously poorly underserved by the medical community at large. And it's a bit of a guess, but I would say that it will probably make them more likely to end up having to reach out through the 9s or the 1s if they've not received everything that they needed. And so I'm interested really to know, when you're talking about the training, do you cover this area specifically? So are there opportunities? And again, I'm aware that we're talking about a small percentage of a small percentage, but potentially a percentage that could come to great harm, having not necessarily received the care that they needed. So apologies for the ramble. My concise question is, are there plans to include provision for pregnant people who are not women in your training plans?
Are you happy for me to take this, Steve?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Hannah, and for highlighting such an important topic as well. So the answer to your question is yes. So when in terms of any of the training, when speaking, we will always say women and birthing people. So that will, as it has today, promoted more conversations around that. And what we're hoping that through that and empowering our learning and development teams around the area is that we can just pass that on through our staff then, so that they are aware that not all people that have babies are women. So that is something that we will highlight through all of the training.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Bethan. And so I think I know Liam wanted to come in at the end. So just to see whether any other comments before we hand over to the final comment for Liam. It looks like there aren't. So the floor is yours, Liam.
Thank you. And just to reiterate, thanks again to Bethan and Steve for an incredible presentation and actually for the amount of work that they have done. There's an awful lot of discretionary effort that's sat behind what's been achieved. And I do know that Bethan, you have had to be a real force for maternity, for midwifery in the wider sector, particularly kind of leaning into colleagues from other professions outside of our organisation and putting the evidence-based view for the improvement that can be achieved. So I know you've been incredibly courageous actually in pushing that agenda. We have a conversation on a regular basis as a board about how non-executive director colleagues can really aid us and play a part in helping us move the organisation forward. And when we set this up at the beginning, one of the things I talked about was the opportunity that WAST has as a Once for Wales provider with an infrastructure that can enable and facilitate improvement across the country. And what Bethan and Steve have shown is how that is evidenced. One of my requests for us as a board is that as we are talking to colleagues across the NHS and the wider Welsh public sector in Wales, it's having this as an example of what's possible. This is one area of healthcare that we are touching, and yet we could be doing so much more in so many other areas. So having this as a reference point, thinking about other clinical specialties where having that access to specialist resource, bringing the whole pathway together. What Bethan does is bring the whole pathway together and bringing that to the fore of others and seeing us as an organisation that does that as well as we do, I think is important. I do want to flag, we did touch on it, but this is evidence-based and evidence creating. So we have worked with the evidence base that already exists. It was fascinating. I was talking with Paul earlier. I was at a NMC Council meeting and dinner earlier this week. I was sat next to my predecessor for dinner, Claire Roche, and we were talking about this work, and she asked the explicit question, have we got away with the shoelaces? I was able to give a positive answer to it. And you know, that tells us how long we've been under this cosh. You know, this has been something around for a little while, and so as I say, you know, we've now moved to the place where that is moving on. And the work that we're doing with that evidence, the research that we're creating, again aligns strategically in the context of our move towards becoming a teaching trust, to having that high academic status. So again, I think that's important. This work has been driven through the Safer Care Collaborative and the MatNeo programme. And I think that's important to note as well, because what it has done is ensure a consistent improvement methodology that is adopted across the country by all of those engaged in the MatNeo programme. And for us, it's ensured that the improvement methodology that we are using is giving us good evidence from a duty of quality perspective to the work that we're doing. So I would just flag that work is important, and it's helping us to consider about quality improvement, quality management systems, and how we're taking that work forward for the duty of quality. And then my final comment, many of you will know I talk about population health an awful lot, and people often kind of ask the question about how does that truly align from an ambulance service perspective. I think this is the perfect example. What we do at the beginning, the way in which we respond at the beginning, from our 999 call or 111 call through until the point that the care of the mum and the baby is taken over somewhere else in the healthcare system, we actually take steps that set out the life journey for that baby. That's what we are doing. So if we do it well, then that baby has got the optimum chance of achieving their full potential. And when we talk about population health, that's what it means. So when Bevin said earlier about reaching out into the global majority, understanding the communities that we have across Wales and how we have differences in outcome, we serve them differently, and how what we put in place now is about serving them equally and giving them all the best chance. When we talk about the different needs of the different parts of our population in the way that Hannah described, and having that at the outset, not something that's bolted on, but something that's built in from the beginning. So for me, when we talk about population health, again, I just lean into this one and say strategically, hold this in your mind, because this is a really good example of population health. We take steps in the first few minutes and hours of a baby's life that will set out their life journey and opportunity. So with that, I just thank them both again for the work they've done.
Good. Well said, Liam. Very interesting. A really helpful roundup, I think, at the end. So a huge thanks, Bevin, and to Steve for coming and giving your time today. It's been educational, it's been informative, it's been inspirational, I think, for all of us. So big thank you for the board and from me personally. And I think that's probably the end of this item, unless there's any last minute questions. Anyone wants to trump Liam on being the last speaker? No one prepared to trump Liam. Excellent. So a final thank you very much. And we'll wish you well for the rest of the day. And we'll let you carry on.
Thank you very much. Have a lovely day to all.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye now.
you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Forever to be known as proverbial Steve, I think.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Bye. Good. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Liam. That was very interesting. Very, very interesting. So, to slightly more prosaic matters, I fear. Is it not? Is it not risk management?
No. First one is,
Have I missed one?
This one.
Oh, so it is. So in not prosaic matters, actually really important matters. Not that I wish to denigrate prosaic matters. Right, item 9, progress actions on avoidable harm. Probably Jason to kick us off.
Thank
I'll use
you,
the paper.
Colin. So since we last touched on this as a board when we met previously, there's been some progress with the actions. So 14 of the actions are related in this paper to attack or manage avoidable harm are noted as complete. 6 are on track as green, and 8 are slightly off amber. 3 are substantially off, and there's there's 1 that we've stopped in terms of its progress. In August, we saw over 19,000 hours lost at emergency departments. That was about 23% of the entire fleet. The board will remember, it's important to remember that the current EMS model of service delivery is predicated on no more than 6,000 hours a month being lost. And of course, in itself, that is too much. And about half of the current volume of red activity that we're currently seeing. So they're 2 key underpinning assumptions in the capacity and therefore the performance that we should be seeing as a result of the model that we're operating. The board is familiar already with a number of the actions that we've been taking over many months now, some of which are included in this paper, to refine and adjust the model that we've got within the resources that are available to us. And one good example of that is some of the changes we've made to how we respond to some of the red work, reducing the multiple attendance ratio, increasing efficiency of the resource that we already have, and also the further expansion of the Charu service. Just 2 examples which are about improving or balancing the best outcomes, the best offer we can create with the resources that are available to us. But nonetheless, those 2 underpinning assumptions of the current EMS model, I think, are really important to hang on to. So we've got, nearly 2 to 3 times the amount of lost hours here that we should be able to, or that we can manage within, and double the activity in terms of those immediately life-threatening patients. All that said, we continue to identify different ways that we can, continually nudge improvement in performance with the resources and the environment we've got. We had a good conversation at the last EASC meeting with both the Chief Ambulance Service Commissioner, the Deputy Chief Exec from NHS Wales, and Chief Executives. And I have to say, support for the improvements that have been identified through the ICAP process. So that's the improvement plans that each of the health boards have identified, was clear from government and a clear expectation set that they should be delivered. That said, we have started to see those improvements going the wrong way as pressure has built across the system. So some of the marginal improvement we'd seen in the last couple of months, particularly in handover at some sites, not all sites, some sites across Wales are starting to decay as pressure builds. Point 8 in this paper just touches on the recent publication from the Association of Ambulance Chief Execs entitled Taking Stock, Assessing Patient Handover Delays a Decade After Zero Tolerance. Quite a sobering kind of paper, really, recognising that the sector has been championing the concerns around avoidable harm that these delays create for over a decade now. And in that decade, there's been deterioration after deterioration after deterioration, not just here in Wales, but across the UK. There isn't anything necessarily new in terms of actions which emerge from that report. But we are cognizant of the HSIB final publication on this issue in England. So that's the Health Safety Inspectorate branch in England, their final report on avoidable harm associated with emergency department handover delays, and some of the lessons which are identified in this Taking Stock paper, particularly about local leadership, system resilience and so on. And in that connection, I think it's just worth saying that particularly with an RM Bevin, we've got an improvement collaborative coming up in the next couple of weeks, which is going to draw on lessons identified from the Northwest region in England and the approach they've taken to sustained improvement in reduction in handover delays. So lots of work still going on, Chair. I'll stop there unless colleagues want to colour in any of the detail in the action plan beneath it, but happy to take any questions.
Fine, okay. Hand up from a couple of hand ups. Before we go to the couple of handouts, couple of points. Can I, if any of the non-execs haven't read that report, it's a really interesting and sobering read. Because it does identify, first of all, how the ambition 10 years ago was clear for a zero tolerance, and here we are 10 years on, and the situation is as we know it. And the comparison between England and Wales, I thought was interesting. And I thought what was interesting also was that the reasons that were cited and some of the improving hospital trusts to reduce handover delays in England seemed to be very similar to the sort of reasons that we were hearing from Cardiff and Vale for how they felt they'd done it in terms of executive focus and management and that kind of thing. So I thought the read kind of reinforced what we already know rather than there being anything kind of eye-catchingly new. And it also really highlighted how this is a systemic problem right across, but that it's not universal. There are pockets of places in England and in Wales, as we know. So it is something which ought to be, if not fixable, at least reducible, if I can put it that way. So I commend that read. The other thing I think we should do is if we can perhaps just take a moment to hear from both Chair of Quality and Chair of F&P, as we've done in the past, because I know we can hear later on from the AAA reports, but it's interesting on this particular issue around these particular risks, because it's important for us as a board to maintain our scrutiny and assurance on the steps that the execs are taking in relation to handover delays and to potential patient harm. So shall we just ask Bethan first, and then we'll just come to Jogger briefly just to cover off that item, and then we can cover other items in your AAA reports when we come to them later on in the agenda. But Bethan, I mean, I know you would have focused on this, and I know you did focus on this in your last meetings.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I mean, most of the items we discuss in Quest relate to risks 2 to 3 and 2 to 4, and that's the reality of the whole meeting, really. And looking at this paper, it would be easy to become complacent, wouldn't it? Because we have seen a reduction in the handover hours from losing more than 30% of conveyancing previously at our sort of highest point, now down to 23. But as you were saying, Jason, the modelling is predicated on a much lower level. And what we hear about in Quest and what we talk about consistently in Quest is the impact this has on people. So this isn't just numbers. It's very easy to trip numbers off the tongue. But some of the impact that we discuss and the harrowing stories that we hear from people is really, really distressing. And even in this update report, it's good to see that we are making great progress on things at all. However, this is a system-wide issue, and that's indicated in our AAA report, to Trust Board, based on the last meeting of Quest. And it is recognised, and we had lots of discussion around this, there is a need for more pace and a broader commitment across the whole system in order to start to really address the challenges here. 49 cases of severe harm, including death in that month. Almost 1,500 handovers, more than 4 hours outside ED departments. So we know not only are individuals waiting in the community far too long, and there's real harm, avoidable harm happening there, which we talked about at Quest, but also someone sitting on the back of an ambulance for 4 hours plus, there is additional levels of avoidable harm there. We've rehearsed this conversation well and repeatedly, haven't we, Chair, here, and also at the meeting of Quest. So I'll probably stop at that point and as you said, perhaps hand over to Jog.
Okay, thanks, Beth.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Chair. I mean, similarly with F&P, it's a topic that we do go into quite a bit of detail, and kind of the key factors we draw out from an assurance perspective is that we're, as an organisation, doing everything we can, influencing externals as much as we can, and trying to stay on top of it. And it is a system-wide issue, but it's a positive that we are seeing some improvement. And I know we've talked about it previously already, that Cardiff and Wales being the outlier, but there are steps being taken behind the scenes where we can influence as well, of actually lessons learned, and as the report set out. So it is something that's always, we always go into a lot of detail. We're very conscious of the public harm, but we, as the committee, get assurance that we're doing as an organisation everything we can within our gift to try and improve this where we can, but we appreciate it's a system-wide issue.
Thanks, Jog, and thanks, Beth. And so now just to go to any questions from the floor. Brendan, you were first, and then I think probably Rachel, and then I think probably, yes, so Brendan.
Yeah, thanks. Firstly, one slightly pedantic point, under point 4, I think we've got a full stop rather than a comma, which makes it look as though 1.5 patients could have come to harm, where I think it's 1,500. So we just need to be clear with that one. The figures are concerning. Everybody spoke about last winter as being, everything coming together at just the wrong time. We're already seeing trends that are putting us in a very similar position, with the added complication that this year we still haven't got the resolution of the medical disputes, so we could see more strikes. We've seen some very significant impacts of those strikes in England, and that is certainly a concern. We also, last year we had the strep A, which caused massive problems. We could well see the emergence of another infection on top of what we're currently managing. So it's very worrying that at this time of year we're talking about a position going into winter where we are obviously going to see significant problems. I think the positive thing with the action plan is that most of the actions that we are putting in that we have control over, we would probably be doing anyway, simply because they are improving efficiency and they're maximising the clinical potential of our staff. And so that was a really positive aspect. Slightly negative aspect, a few of us went to the 6 Goals Network meeting earlier this week. I'd have to say it was disappointing that colleagues from the health boards were often talking about improvements that were really no more than sticking plasters over the underlying problem of the handover delays. And there was far less discussion around how we actually deal with that problem and get the health boards in Wales to a position where they are comparable with the best across the UK. We know the reasons that some of the hospitals are doing better across the UK. It's around very strong leadership, very clear messages that handovers are not to be tolerated, and prioritisation and putting investment in the right places. Unfortunately, I don't know, I came back from that meeting with a real feeling that there was too much talk about the sticking plaster rather than addressing the underlying wound. So I think it's something that we're going to have to be absolutely relentless with over the coming months going into winter.
Okay, thanks, Brendan. Come to Martin in a moment. So shall we go to Rachel, then to Paul, then to Martin?
Yeah, I was just going to a couple of points. So one, notwithstanding that obviously that didn't go particularly well, that thing. There is definitely, letters from Nick Woods. There's, the 6 Goals programme absolutely clear about the improvements that the health boards are going to make in this and other areas as well. So it's disappointing that that didn't go that well. But I was just going to say, Chair, that I think we had a reflection on this at ELT yesterday, and we're going to refresh this paper a little bit for next time. This has been a kind of a kind of rehearsing of something that was an initial paper, an initial set of actions 12 months ago. So we're going to kind of do a big refresh of it. And we were challenging ourselves even yesterday to say, what are the different and additional things we could do, particularly as we go in through winter, because Welsh Government have asked all organisations to reflect on this winter and anything else that we might do. So you will see a slightly different paper come through next time, which also will include some of the modelling that we've been doing, which is sobering in terms of potential scenarios that might play out in terms of our ability to respond to people across winter. But hopefully that will be helpful as kind of a refreshed piece next time as well.
Thanks, Rachel. Paul.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. First of all, in terms of the handover delay, we also in P&C look at the effect on staff, because obviously that has a significant impact on staff, and we particularly looked at stress and mental health issues in the last meeting, which is in our AAA. But I wanted to ask a question actually about the same-day emergency care. It's still awful in terms of our, and I'm not sure, is that a policy issue, is it a capacity issue? Because we have an opportunity to refer more patients, and yet it's actually very, very, very little.
Yeah, I mean, I'll
I
start.
don't know why.
I'll start, Paul, and hand over to Andy. I mean, it's not a policy issue because there's a nationally agreed referral protocol, clinically signed off referral protocol, which enables us, our paramedics, both those on the ground and in our contact centres, that's an important feature, to be able to refer patients into same-day emergency care. What we've got is a variation in application of that nationally agreed and signed off protocol. We expect, we think or expect from our analysis that about 4% of total activity could be referred safely into SDECs across Wales, but as you say, the current ability to do so is woeful. We've got variation. I don't know, Andy, if you just want to talk about what's going on and what we're trying to do here to apply pressure to colleagues to broaden the acceptance criteria.
Yeah, you kind of summed it up really well there, Jason. We worked for months on developing a criteria across all the health boards with us involved and agreed where I thought was going to be a really good criteria. Still quite risk averse for my liking, but nevertheless, I thought, well, here's a good start, and we should be able to move on that. But what we've seen is that as each of these SDECs has come online, each one, well, we don't like that bit, so we'll not accept patients of that kind, to a point where it's, well, for us, these have a limited impact. And as you know, it's kind of told in the figures really in respect to that. That said, it's one of those issues we raise again and again and again. One of the, I'm not saying in the health board, but one of the health boards was really challenged in this, which was a flat refusal for any referral at all from West into. We have a face-to-face with them next week, where that will be number one on the agenda for me that we really need to get. So I do see some, I'm the eternal optimist on this one, Paul. So I do see green shoots that we might have made the point on this. But time will tell.
Carry on, Paul.
So, Paul, in response to what you were saying, there do seem to be some capacity issues with some health boards because it's the same type of clinical staff that are managing the SDECs that are doing PDs and other departments. So that was fed back at the medical directors meeting when we discussed.
It just worries me that we invest in a model, and we do this often in NHS Wales. We invest in a model, we put a lot of money into it, a lot of effort into it. It doesn't deliver, and we still keep it going. And that worries me that these SDECs have been established. We had great expectations for these. And now, actually, that investment doesn't seem to be giving much return. And we could have invested in something else, like APPs, like some of the other things that we could do. And that's what worries me. We very rarely go back and say, well, actually, that doesn't work. It might be working for someone, and it'd be helpful to know if that's the case. Is it working for someone? It's not working for us, but is it working for someone? Because otherwise, there is, we've had lots of community investment in the past. We've now got SDEC's investment. The return on the investment in NHS Wales always seems to be a bit, well, we'll keep it going. It's not working, but we've invested in it. And that worries me, particularly in the current.
I think primary care again, good use out of the SDECs. Obviously, significantly better than we can imagine.
It'd be useful to have more information, I think, about the SDEC stuff.
We could probably get some of that. We do have it. In fact, Alex, Chair Alex is attending the 6 Gold Pro report for me today, because we're all here, and they've got a dashboard which they're going to be presenting. So I think hopefully we'll see some data.
That could be shared informally across the board. That'd be helpful.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe to pick that up and just share something around.
Thank you.
That'd be helpful. Okay, so going around the table, I think Liam, do you hand up? And I think probably Martin came in first. Shall we go to you, Martin, and then just like Lee?
Just going to come in on the SDEC.
Oh no, sorry. Okay, go on then, Liam. Yes, go on. Sorry.
So just in respect to the SDEC stuff, I think a couple of observations. One is it isn't just us that are experiencing these challenges. So conversations I've had with ED consultants, it's no different. So actually from within the emergency department, medics have similar issues with being able to transfer care between the emergency department and the SDEC. So I think the protocols, the level of staffing, all of the factors that are around each individual SDEC are contributing not only to actually our ability to use it, but also to the wider emergency care community. I would pick up all on the value-based healthcare analysis that should be taking place. So I have pushed quite hardly on the programme need for 6 goals and said, where is it? Utilisation is not a measure of value, and at the moment we are seeing utilisation rather than the measures of value. And I think that has to be something we keep pushing on. There are, if I think about the areas where we have some of our poorest performance in terms of transfers of care, they are the areas where you have the most different handoff points. So if you walk into certain hospitals, there are multiple points and multiple streaming points. So it's not even a single streaming point. There are multiple streaming points, and then there are multiple points that go on from there. So in terms of if you put lean onto that, you just wouldn't do those things. No industry outside would have that many breakpoints in the system. So I think for us, really seeking that the 6 goals are asked to do this work through a value-based lens, to really think about what are we getting back, what does it mean in terms of whole pathway, because the SDEC should be driving improvements at a whole pathway level that are reducing length of stay, that are reducing admissions and then length of stay, sorry. So I just make some of those observations about how we, as a board, as an organisation, I think we need to be pushing harder there in that space. There was a really good report came out this week, and it was actually completed for NHS England and the NHS Confederation in England by Carnal Farah. And it evidences really clearly, based on a large number of ICBs, integrated care boards in England, how the direct correlation between investment in out-of-hospital services and admission rates. So there's a really strong statement there. So again, for us, leaning into the 6 goals and understanding how the investment is being applied into the primary and community infrastructure to give us the benefit. So some of that will be about how our paramedics, how our APPs, our CSD colleagues can use things through a directory of services and get a responsive response in the community. But also it's also about, actually, we know it makes a difference. If you've got good primary care, then we know evidence goes back about 40 years on this, you will have less emergency admissions, you will have less emergency demand. So I think, again, I think for me, it's how do we help bring us back to the evidence base in some of this, because some of this does feel a bit faddy sometimes. Yeah.
Okay, so just thanks, Liam, very helpful. So just going on the table. So Martin, I think it was Kerry, wasn't it? Wanted to come in? Is it Kerry? Yeah, good, Kerry. So Martin first, then
No,
we'll lead to us.
I'll try and be brief because I think a lot of the issues have already been covered, but it's probably worth repeating some of the things that have been said. The first thing is the data is not encouraging, is it? I mean, it's actually saying the opposite of what we would have hoped for by now. And I think Bethan made the point, you know, it's becoming normal and we've got to be careful. It does, you know, that we don't let it become acceptable just because it's normal. So I think the other thing to say, though, is that I believe the solutions are with the other trusts, but our responsibility is to keep pressure on them. And I think we are a partner with them. And I'm sure we can do things that help them, if you like, to manage the situation. And I think that continuing relationship with each of the trusts is probably more important than an all Wales type of initiative. It's interesting, isn't it, when you look at the data. I mean, Cardiff are the only one that have backed this trend for 2 years, if you look at this. Although it is interesting that up in North, it's looked tremendously better in the last few months. Whether that's a blip, I don't know. I suspect it may be looking at the ups and downs. But I just think, you know, we must continue to keep pressure on the other trusts. We must continue to collaborate, and we don't want to let it become normal. And I'm sure we come on to later to talk about the impact on staff. I mean, I don't think our staff come to work to sit in the backs of ambulances. They don't. I mean, we talked about the fantastic work earlier that they're capable of doing. That's what excites them. That's what gets them up in the morning, not the prospect of going back to the ambulance they left a shift ago. So I mean, I've said it. It's all been said by other people. It's probably worth repeating. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Martin. No, and I think we all share that. And I know, you know, Paul referenced the issue around the impact on people as well. And I think, you know, we do recognise that, you know, that it's very significant, and we see it in a number of other metrics that we measure, don't we? I think Lee wanted to come in also, but anyway, let's go to Kerry next, and then back to Lee, if that's the case.
Thanks, Chair. So my point builds neatly on from Martin's, actually. So I wanted to ask about the immediate release request for Amber 1. So if I'm reading the performance report correctly, for July and August, of less than half requests were accepted for Amber 1. So I'm particularly worried about stroke patients. I'm worried about all the patients. So it says 272 immediate release requests for Amber 1, and 140 were released. So, you know, it's almost half that weren't. So the question for me is the escalation process sufficient? Is there anything more we can do? I know that a lot is being done. So I think for red release requests, it gets escalated weekly to the chief exec. So can we do anything more on that? And then my second question is a more generic question around, we've got a very difficult financial climate. We're looking at very difficult performance figures, you know, harm to patients. In terms of, you know, next year in particular in the winter, you know, all the financial constraints that we're facing, are they going to, you know, make the situation worse than we're already forecasting? So I know you're saying, Rachel, that you're coming back with some modelling for us. But as a general point, I'd just like to hear whether the exec feel that, you know, these constraints are going to see these figures worsen.
Yeah, okay. I'll tackle both of those, Kerry, if I can, and probably bring Lee in just on the first one for a bit around Amber 1. So, I mean, the report has gone across the chief execs this morning for last week on all immediate release directions. You know, we have had now, we are seeing now good, stable improvement in reds. You know, 6 of the 7 health boards delivered 100% compliance to red immediate release directions last week. But you're right, there is, you know, quite a way to go on the amber. one or amber more broadly, but we do, yeah, the escalation for ambers is the same as reds in terms of sharing the reporting and signalling compliance each week. Lee might want to talk a bit more about what we do in real time in terms of the request that's made and how we handle that with health board colleagues. On the financial outlook across the next 2 quarters, it's not yet clear what additional savings all health organisations across Wales will need to deliver. But what is clear is that there is a minimum expectation that all organisations deliver on the savings plans which were identified at the beginning of the year. So that's that saw a position. These numbers I'm about to quote are not are open source. That saw a position of a deficit of about 648 million at the beginning of the year, and the minimum expectation is that is delivered. Now, NHS Wales is some way adrift of that.
It isn't being delivered year to date, so it's going to have to be
exactly. So it's already some way adrift of that. So those organisations which are operating in deficit, largely health boards, trusts are broadly balanced, but not health boards are going to have to return to that 648 deficit and potentially go further. But the go further bit is not yet clear in terms of the quantum of that, Kerry. So whilst health board colleagues will of course be looking to make savings and take choices which avoid directly impacting capacity, staffing, flow, in urgent and emergency care, there is of course a very real risk that given the scale of the cost reduction that will need to take place across the next 2 quarters, that will impact people posts capacity. And whilst they will not be taken, it's unlikely they will be taken out in urgent emergency care. What it will mean is that the rest of the system will become stickier, if I could describe it like that, stickier, slower, more clunky. And that will inevitably lead to a risk of disrupted flow in urgent emergency care, which will of course impact us. So a bit of a long-winded answer because some of it is not yet clear, but I think it's fair to say that there is a real and present danger that the system could become stickier and slower as we go through winter as a result of the circumstances we find ourselves in. I don't know whether Lee, you want to add anything else on Amber 1 immediate release directions?
Yeah, I mean, if it's okay, Chair, because this is where I wanted to
actually build please, so roll it in. Yeah,
so I'll take that first, and
absolutely,
and then share. What's interesting behind Amber is you'll see that there's one particular site that worsens the picture for overall Wales. That's not only a particular site that presents problems on the immediate release, but also on the extent of the handover delays as well. And as an example, at that site this week, we had a handover delay that exceeded 30 hours, and it's September. So I just want to add some flavour of the current operational constraints that we're having to contend with. So if that site's removed, the Amber position does look much better. And I think that I can, as I look at this every week, I can share that there are certainly sites who have demonstrated a equal improvement in their Amber as they have in their red. So it might be worth perhaps next time we perhaps try and separate that out so we could see how some sites are comparing, because it's definitely different.
I think that's really critical because it has such a direct link to patient harm, if my understanding is correct. So it feels appropriate that we focus on that.
Yeah,
But the escalation is certainly occurring. There's a real-time escalation through the ODU, and as Jason says, there's a report that goes to Director General for Health, as there is my sharing with the Chief Operating Officers each week, giving them some information around. We investigate 10% of all the ambers. There are too many to investigate them all, but we investigate all reds and 10% of the ambers, and I share the output of that with Chief Operating Officer colleagues. So hopefully that's helpful on the immediate release. Where I felt compelled to share, given risk, because it has connections with risk 223 and 224, and of course I own risk 223. And for me, there's a couple of aspects in here. I've mentioned one site with 30-hour handover delays. I mean, even now there are 2 sites with handover delays of over 15 hours. This as a patient experience and this as a staff experience is not getting better. And it's certainly not getting anywhere near to the levels where we would have liked, even at the 2019 levels, which of course at the time were high. We are having some constraints in our own capacity as well. That's playing out as we are seeing in our staff attendance. Staff attendance has upticked through August. I was hoping for some improvement in September. I'm not confident that that's going to be realised. But of course, a big underlying factor is what Martin's just mentioned, which is the workplace experience. And I know, Jason, you talk quite openly about the workplace experience, because our staff do not come to work to spend 15 hours sitting outside of an emergency department. So that's continuing to play out as well in our ability for staff to finish their shifts on time, to be able to go home, take rest between their hours of work. And so that is just playing out as a poor work experience, which will inevitably play out in attendance at work. The other aspect as well, which certainly been you've alluded to, is the financial position that we're in. The organisation, we have already had to take decisions in terms of how spending occurs. We're obviously waiting to hear from government in terms of what the future looks like, in terms of whether we need to go further. But for me, it's beginning to play out in terms of the pull and the tug between financial attainment and quality of service. The tug is beginning to materialise now, and the risk for me is that the tug will materialise even more as we go into the pressures of winter. My view is I don't think we should expect an improvement in lost hours in winter. I'm not really seeing signs that it's going to drastically materialise. Some of the elements that are being spoken of are commendable. But given the time that we've got between now and winter, the pace that we've seen to date, and that it's likely a form of investment or reallocation of funding is going to be necessary to make transformation, I'm afraid I have a pessimistic view in terms of winter. Now, as already Rachel's talked about, we were in discussions as an executive about, so what else can we do? It's healthy and hopefully of assurance to our non-executives that that's where our heads are at. We are continually looking for what it is that we can do. But I feel that just the enormity of the consequence of the flow problem is simply, it's so difficult to mitigate. And we will only be able to do what we can do within the resource that we have got as we head into this winter. So it is, as Brendan said, I think, concerning. I'm sorry. Well, look, I mean, just to I suppose wrap that off. I mean, I'll just take us back to the level of handover delays, which our model is predicated on. Yeah. 6,000 hours is too much. It's too many, but we are 3 times that now. So it's, I mean, I'll use a slightly different set of language to Lee's point. It is impossible for us to mitigate that loss, that level of loss in our capacity, in our fleet, to reproduce that capacity that's lost within the resources that we've already got. And that doesn't take account of the impact on our people, when they're sitting outside the hospital for 20,000 hours last month. So whilst we are focused and we're continually trying to find different ways to chip away at the level of loss, be more efficient with what we've got, but we just cannot mitigate that level of loss to the level
necessary to reduce the delays we're seeing. It's just not possible. So it's quite sobering, but that's where we are. Okay. All right, thank you, everybody. I think we'll move on from this, but just to kind of summarise, we're asked to note the progress the Trust has made, which we've done, and to consider whether there's any further actions. I think it's very helpful to hear that there'll be a slightly revised format in a way of the paper. If we just cast our minds back, that we had this item on the agenda a few months ago, because it was obviously escalating through our committee structure as being a continuing and major issue. We decided that we would therefore ask for this report to be tabled in subsequent boards, and we've continued to do that over the last few boards, and obviously we're going to continue to do that because it is so important. It is clearly our obligation to make sure that as a board, although we recognise that trying to go from the 19,000 or maybe even more lost hours down to 6 is something that we can't do anything very much about. It is necessarily imperative that we as a board are seen to be looking at all the little things that we can do, because at least if nothing else, we can put a hand on our heart and say to everybody in the system, we are doing our bit, even though our bit is limited to things like roster changes and changes to vehicle allocations and those sorts of things that do make a difference, but they pale into not necessarily insignificant, but they're very small things compared to 19 or more than 19,000 lost hours. But I think we can demonstrate that we're doing our bit, and we must continue to do that. So good to see a new paper next time, and we'll look forward to seeing that in 2 months' time. Okay, we'll take one more item, and then we'll take a break. So it now is to the much trailed. It now is your time to talk about risk.
Thanks, Chair. You will know that the committees have reviewed all of these risks. So the 15 risks have been reviewed since the last board meeting by Quest, by Finance and Performance, by the Audit Committee, and by the People and Culture Committee. And just as a reminder, we do set the agenda for these meetings with these highest rated risks in mind. We do that proactively with the chair and the lead when we're setting the agenda. So it is not just an item on there, the whole agenda is geared towards that. And what we had agreed is that we would look at the highest rated risks here, and the beauty of this paper following after the previous paper is that we've spoken a lot about risk 223 and 224. You'll see that all of these risks have been reviewed since the last review date as of 1st of September. You'll also see that the changes are marked in blue, which I think is helpful to see some of the movement there and maybe some of the changes in the actions. And then the summary here at paragraph 7 and after that draws together on 223 and 224 in particular, all those various forums where it's been discussed, and we just rehearsed that there. And of course, we'll be looking at these risks in particular with this refresh paper in mind as well when it comes through for the next time. So I won't say anything more on 223, 224, because I think you've got the detail there and we've just spoken about it in detail. The other two higher rated risks are 160, which is sickness absence rates. You'll see that there are a number of updated actions there. Specifically, there's quite a bit around the Speaking Up Safely program as well. And we talked about that quite a bit in People and Culture Committee as well, and that's in the AAA report. And also risk 201 on reputational damage. We do have a specific partnership and engagement report going to the November People and Culture Committee as well, where we'll look at this in a bit more detail. And no doubt Angie and Estelle could add some more flavour to these risks if there are any questions. So they were the only ones that I was going to pull out, Chair. There's some information there about the risk transformation program, which the Audit Committee has oversight of as well. And you have all those risks, but just to reiterate again that they have had some very good discussions as evidenced in the committee AAA reports.
Good, thanks Trish. Estelle.
Thanks, Kevin. I just wanted to come back to that risk on 201 around reputation, which has been static for a very long time now. But if you think about the conversations that preceded this paper, you can see why the risk remains elevated, because while we all know how much work is going on in the background to try and de-escalate some of the situations, improve performance, work with partners, etc. But unfortunately, we remain, I suppose, the flag carrier for some of these risks in the system. And I need only refer you to any issue in the health service in Wales, in some of the media, is inevitably accompanied by a photograph of an ambulance, regardless of whether it actually is an ambulance-related issue, because it's become a metaphor for some of the pressures in the system. So we'll pick this up in more detail, as Trish says, at PCC. Clearly, as we go into the winter, for all the reasons we've just discussed, now is not going to be the time to de-escalate that risk. But I would like to think, on the back of some of the work that we will be doing around the revised strategy, we may be able to offer further assurance and perhaps de-escalate it somewhat in 24-25, because it has been sitting at that for a while. Because I say, despite best efforts, unfortunately, it is linked to performance, to patient harm, to public perception, perhaps more than stakeholders per se who understand the pressures. But that notwithstanding, we do know that, you know, in terms of stakeholders, Jason and I deal very frequently with political correspondence, which, you know, raises concern about all those issues. So I just wanted to provide assurance that it's not just sitting at that rating, you know, because I can't be bothered to revise it, or we're not doing anything. It's a function of the environment within which we're working currently.
Thanks, Estelle. Well understood. Andrew.
It was just in relation to the risk in terms of attendance, just to flag, we definitely did have a blip in August. I'm pleased to say in September we're back on track. But the fact that this is remaining static, I think, is important. Do not feel that this is one that we can drop. And a reference, we had audit committee, and I'm sure Martin might raise it later, in terms of the challenge around making sure we remain focused on this against the backdrop of the previous discussion, that lived experience for colleagues, the impact that's having. So it was just to say this remains an area of significant challenge, scrutiny, but we are working with all of our colleagues, particularly in the ops area, to make sure that we are supportive of colleagues, but also making sure our managers are managing attendance. It was just to give that level of assurance.
Thanks, Angie. It's a kind of unintended consequence. An unintended consequence of long handover delays is, you know, morale, motivation, sickness, and other metrics that we measure, indicating indirectly the consequences of handover delays and so on. Okay. Any other questions to Trish in relation to the risk paper? Doesn't look like it. So we're just asked to do a number of things. To receive assurance on the review and attention to the principal risks. I think we've done that. We note the ratings and the mitigating actions. We note there have been no material changes, and we note the update on the risk management and transformation program. So we do all that. So that takes us to time for a break, 15 minutes. So if we take a break now, it'll be 20 minutes to 12. So if we get back in 15 minutes time, that's grand. Good. So thank you very much. Come back so timely fashion, which is grand. And I think item 11, Rachel, medium term integrated plan.
Thank you, yes.
Which was the right phrase, but the wrong way around. All the right words, but not necessarily the right order.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. So this, I won't say much about this report. It's a for noting report. It has been through F&P and it simply sets out where we are against each of the kind of major deliverables within our current year's IMTP. In broad terms, I think it shows, you know, we're making good progress. It does pull out those deliverables which are either red or amber, so that the board is able to see those at a glance. And I think it's probably just worth reflecting on the fact that we're doing well for the end of Q2, but obviously, as we've just been talking about, we're going through a winter period where, you know, in all likelihood, you know, members of the teams across each of our respective directorates are going to be pulled into doing, you know, managing operationally. So there's always a risk at the end of the year that some of these things perhaps go a little bit slower than we might want, but it's there for noting today and to give you assurance of the work that we're doing. Happy to take any questions.
Good, thanks, Rachel. So, any questions on the paper progress as we're moving forward? John.
Just a comment there, Chair, just for everyone attending and listening. It did get a good airing at the F&P recently, and it's something that we do every meeting. We do go through in good detail, like Rachel said. So just for assurance, it does get a good discussion there.
Good, thank you. Okay, well in that case we'll move on because we note the progress. Thank you, Rachel. For that. So let's move on to the next item then, which is item 12. So to Chris, I think, to financial performance.
Thank you, Chairman. In a similar vein, again, this paper in the form of a presentation had quite a detailed hearing at F&P at the beginning of last week. So all I was going to do, I'll take the paper as read, was just highlight a couple of very brief updates beyond that paper. Particularly, you'll see in paragraph 3, calling out the one sort of remaining income risk that we had a long discussion around at F&P, and where we are with securing that 5.7 million for the 100 whole-time equivalents that we employed last year. Just a bit of an update. You'll see in paragraph 3, there's 3 bullet points that's been built up, and it's just to confirm we've got final confirmation and starting to receive the cash, or will start to receive the cash next month, hopefully now, but it has been fully confirmed by finance colleagues from an EASC perspective of the first 2. The 2.485 million essentially we already had, but it's the confirmation that we won't use it on anything else. We'll point it towards that 5.7 million 100 requirement. The next bullet point, the 100, the next million that have been confirmed as available non-recurrently by the Commissioner has now been confirmed by the finance team as well. So that has started to flow through us. So the outstanding element, the remaining element, is the further 2 million continuing to be sought from the 6 goals programme. Now again, specifically from a finance perspective, there are mitigations and plans that we could put in place should that not materialise. Clearly, in the context of the conversations we've already had today, that will have an impact on resource capacity through the winter, and we'll be very clear with commissioners what that would look like. Hopefully it won't come to that. Hopefully, that the conversations to secure that final element of that funding is ongoing, and hopefully will be confirmed. And certainly by the time we next meet as a board will need to be confirmed. Otherwise, we would have to start to take some of those mitigating actions, or at least get back into that conversation around balancing that risk, the financial risk, against other risks that we'll need to manage going forward. So that was the one item. Second one for me was, and we've touched on this already again, and the next paragraph there talks briefly around the further ask that potentially was being made by all NHS Wales organisations from a government perspective in light of the wider NHS Wales finance position this year, and that clarity on anything else that might be required of us is still awaited. Only bit to add to what we've already said on that one today is, I think health boards are probably going to be treated in a particular way, and then other organisations who are either in balance or smaller in the scheme of the overall position are probably going to be subject to more individual conversations and individual positions that we might have to agree. That may or may not give us an opportunity to further influence what that might be as we have those conversations. But again, by the time we meet next time, that will need to be clearer. The only other one I was going to just flagging is on the capital side of the plan and the delivery, and just hopefully a little bit of good news from an operational estate perspective was to confirm that the executive leadership team yesterday made final approval for the business case for the new ambulance station in Dolgellau. So that's through its final hurdle now in terms of governance. Colleagues will know it's been a little while coming because it's not been easy to find a suitable site in the town, but we have now got an agreed suitable site. So we will be motoring on government tender, getting that work completed, and hopefully in a position to complete that work for a new station, much needed new station in Dolgellau within the next sort of 6 to 8 months.
How big will that be as a matter of interest? Sorry, how big will that station be? Just as a matter of interest. I mean, how many staff and crew together?
I think it's 2 EAs and a few NETS vehicles, a couple of cars. We're also building a bigger facility because it'd be hard to have a smaller facility than we currently got because it's one room in the station, in a fire station. But we're also providing some much needed additional sort of locality space, some meeting room space, some training space, which that part of Wales, given the geography, is probably lacking a little bit. And actually, it will give us a little bit of a hub that, on that north to south route of that side of the country that will be able to be used by others as well. Total cost of that, we put 350,000 aside in the plan this year for that as a capital scheme. Cost us spiraling up a little bit. The business case is currently just under 420,000.
When do you think you might open?
It's scheduled to be. It's hopeful to be within this financial year. It's going to slip. That's going to slip a little bit because it's taking a bit longer, and there's a few legals about the leasing to still iron out. But still, hopefully, to complete it certainly by late spring, early summer next year. May June time next year probably.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions to Chris? Yes.
It's probably not a question, Chris. It's more of a comment, really. We're 6 months into the year. We don't know whether we'll be asked to find further savings, or we don't know if we have to claw back the 2 million.
That's right.
And we'll know by November, end of November. That's our next board meeting.
Yeah.
It just constrains the time
absolutely.
we can take action.
No.
I just, we need to recognise that actually, even if we had a plan, that plan is going to be really difficult in the most difficult time of the year in a constrained time frame. So the sooner we know, the better.
I think, hopefully we'll know before the end of November. I say November because next time we hopefully organisationally we should know hopefully in the next couple of weeks. But that has been the next couple of weeks for a little while. For the last few weeks. Yeah, exactly. That is recognised, and every opportunity that I and the other finance directors imagine, it's impact for us. Imagine the impact of health have been very clear that again when those submissions were put in, a number of those assumed impact in terms of benefit financially for making year with effect from the beginning of September, because we're in August, and obviously another month has gone. So that is very clearly articulated at every opportunity. And it's noted and recognised as such. I think the part of the delay is that it's not just an NHS Wales within government issue. This is across departmental, obviously Welsh government issue that is needed to go through.
I think we as a board just need to recognise that the longer it goes on, the tougher it is for the exec to deliver on these.
Couldn't agree more.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it's just to build on Paul's point. So we've been very clear with commissioners and with government of the spending profile scenarios if decisions on income are delayed, and in terms of the discretionary spend that we've got and how we would be able to handle that in the last quarter. We've been very clear that if we don't see confirmation of the assumed 2 million, then there is a very steep reduction in available discretionary spend in the last quarter. At the time.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions, Chris? I think not. Hannah. No, good. Okay, so we know we gain assurance in relation to month 5 petition. We know the capital programme, and we've also seen those 2 submissions that were in the appendices. So that's done. Thank you very much, Chris. And on to item 13, back to Rachel for the MIQPR.
Thank you. So again, I won't spend too long on this, knowing that people will have had a chance to read it. Just to pull out perhaps a couple of highlights that we haven't already talked about. One is in relation to our 111 service. I think at the last board we kind of noted that actually performance was improving, and that it's really pleasing to see that has continued. So we had a really excellent call abandonment rate of only 3.2% in August. So that was below achieving the target, and in terms of the clinicians in the 111 service, they're getting to patients, all of the priority patients are getting a ring back within the timescale that we kind of agreed with our commissioners as a reasonable time frame. So that is really good to see, and obviously the team there are working very hard to maintain that, and there are lots of actions taking place within the team, with the 111 commissioners on continuing to improve the service in that area. So that's really good. I won't say much about the 999 metrics because I think we've covered the majority of those through the discussion on the harm report. We've also touched, I think, in terms of some of our people metrics, we've touched on things like the sickness levels. So probably don't need to pick that up too much. The one I was going to pick up perhaps was just as a slight caution really was the work on one of our system measures, which is around the levels of consultant close rates. So you'll see there that those rates have actually dropped slightly the last couple of months, whilst we are obviously trying to get to a higher level to 17% by the end of the year. We had an excellent presentation from Steve Clinton and execs yesterday, who obviously leads that service. Really, really robust analysis of the actions that we need to take now to make sure that we do get to that 17%, and in a meaningful way. So it's not, the 17% isn't just about sending patients in taxis to EDs. It's about really trying to close and meet the patient's needs at home. And actually, as an exec team, we, there were some things that we needed to support, which we committed to, and got some further discussions going on in terms of further actions that we can take in that area. So I think there was some more confidence at the end of that discussion that actually with the team kind of working on it and some support from us as execs, we can make some good progress again in that area. So that was really positive. So I think that's all I'll say, just to pull out, Chair, as a couple of highlights. But happy again to take any questions in detail.
Good, thank you. Martin.
Yeah, I want to talk about people, our people workforce resourcing. It's page 6 and 7, and there's 4 points on there. And all of them are quite worrying, really. I think the hours produced is not meeting its target. The abstraction rates are well above the 30%. And that we're targeting the trust sickness absence, although it's moving in the right direction, it's still poor, and it has been for a number of years. And the training one also gives me cause for concern. I just think that all 4 of them coming together, I read them and I thought they're all pretty negative. And just begged the question, what are we doing about this? I realise that it's looked at in another committee, I get that, but I still have concerns that particularly some of these things, because I think it's like a blot on our copybook, which isn't bad actually, but this is a blot. It's not going away. I'm pretty sure the execs get fingers poked in their chests every time they have some discussion about performance, and I'm just concerned that it's not moving fast enough, maybe in the right direction, that is.
I mean, Andy may well want to go in. If I just say one thing in response to that, I think actually the last time we had our performance review with Welsh Government, with Judith Paget, she actually complimented us so notwithstanding there's much more to do, but actually on the progress we've made on sickness absence, because we've come from a very high level and we had achieved our kind of 8% target by the end of the year. So whilst there's there are risks, and I get, and Angie will speak to that, I'm sure. From a confidence perspective, actually Welsh Government could see a huge amount of work that we've done last year in particular, and were complimentary about that. So whilst we can't sit on our laurels, as it were, I think there was some confidence in us as an organisation, more than there has been in the past, which was positive to hear, actually. But Angie, I'm sure you know.
Yeah, I'll happily come in a few points. You might want to come in as well, Lee, perhaps on a few as well, just to sort of give that assurance. And again, I think I said it at the audit committee, Martin, we definitely are not complacent, and this is one where we are totally focused in terms of the delivery of it. In the context of the wider ambulance sector, we are holding our own, but actually the figures that we are assessed on are about being in NHS Wales. So we accept that, we are out of kilter with the rest of NHS Wales. So we are trying a wide range of measures and continue to focus on our managers, making sure they do feel that level of confidence to, make sure that they're taking early action if people are potentially becoming unwell, doing quick referrals to occupational health, doing the return to works, making sure they're clear, all those process things that happen, but also working with our trade union colleagues in terms of managing sick absence cases proactively. And just on the point in terms of the training, just to give you again a level of assurance, we did look at in our exec leadership team about mandatory in-service training. Were they dipping our PADR results? What could we do? And we've done a much more sort of targeted, looking at parts of the organisation where perhaps they're a little less good than they should be. In terms of the sort of trajectory, they all look like they're going to go up. And I just think that the blip of a summer period does have an impact on this. But I don't know, Lee, if you wanted to say any more in terms of attendance. I do feel that this is one where we never stop working on it, because we absolutely accept you cannot take this for granted. And there are a range of measures that we're doing, but there's also the external environment that we're also dealing with. But I absolutely acknowledge, Martin, and I think we continue to respect the challenge and think about what are we going to do. Did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd add is, everything you said, Angie, is right. And if I just think about going forward now, there's some regular areas of focus that the management team are continually returned to, which includes mandatory training, PADRs, attendance management. And what we do find, and I anticipate it will happen as we go into winter, of course, is as the operational pressures increase, and we've just had 2 periods at which we've gone from REAP 2 to REAP 3, that redirects the attention of management. We go from a position where we have an absolute focus on these areas to one where, it's a little firefighting. It's let's get through today. And so what we need to do, because it's going to happen as we come into winter, we're going to go REAP 3. I think that's highly likely. We'll see if we end up at REAP 4. Is how we balance, though, the need to keep on top of the regular turnover of management activity when those operational pressures come on top. It's a competing priority that we contend with each year, but it'll be something that we're very alert to it. And through my structures now with the senior leadership team and the senior operations team, I know that the WAD representative is feeding this information into the senior operations team. So at that level, we've got the continual focus happening.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to build on that, we've recently seen some benchmarking data on abstraction rates across 5 other organisations in the UK.
And we're essentially middle of the pack. That's not to say that we haven't got work to do and improvements to make in some areas, because we have. But I'm looking at it. I've got it on my screen now. I'm looking at it now. There are 2 organisations. Well, one which is 6% worse than us, one which is bang on comparable with us, one which is about 0.5% less than us, and then 2 of those 5 which are 4% less. 6% less. So, we're kind of middle of the pack in the benchmarking data. That's not to say we haven't got improvements to make, because we have, but we're certainly not an outlier in overall abstraction rates.
I'll come back in a minute. Sorry, Paul. Go on.
Yeah, I was just going to give some assurance to Martin and the board that we talk about this and we look at it in detail at the P&C committee. I think last time we looked at stress and mental health issues, which is our biggest cause for absence. And we also looked at things like the age groups, because it tends to be in the older age group that we've got that higher level of sickness absence. So there's an issue for us about the age groups that make up our workforce, but also the environment in which they work. You've already talked about, Martin, the working environment. But the other thing that we talked about at P&C is the financial environment in which families are working in currently, and the fact that some of our work around reducing or restricting a little the overtime, which people rely on. There are a number of issues that are cumulative that are causing additional stress and anxiety to our workforce, but it tends to be in a particular group. The other thing that we've talked about is, and we've asked for some further work, is the well-being offer that we are giving, is that actually delivering? So whilst we're putting all these things in place, where's the evidence to show that actually that's making a difference to people, either preventing them from being absent from work or actually helping them to return early to work? So that's another area. So whilst we're looking at sickness, we're looking at other aspects of absence. We're also looking at, well, what's the evidence that the support we are putting in actually delivers what we expect it to deliver? So to give you some assurance that that is a focus in every meeting that we have. We go through the action plan and we have deep dives on different elements of the absence. But the work environment and now the community environment in which these families are living, I think is having added stress. And it's likely, let's be honest, that we will see this as a greater challenge going through the winter, where handover delay is likely to increase, where real sickness, flu, COVID, we now might see that elevate. We've talked about other viral infections. So we've got to keep an eye on it and we've got to keep pushing on it, because it's likely that there will be further challenges as we go into the winter months.
Thanks, Chair. If I may, the 2 points I wanted to just draw out from here. Earlier on I was the voice of pessimism, but I think I would just like to say something about 111. The improvement that we've seen in 111 delivery is significant, it's huge, and the team have worked really diligently in 111 to achieve that. So for me, I'd really like to recognise what's occurred for 111. What's good there as well, also just to inform the board, is that we have started to delve into more data relating to the service we're providing to those contacting us on the Welsh language line in order to try and bring about an equal improvement for callers wanting to speak to us in Welsh. So the team is very much focusing on that now. And just the other one I wanted to mention is the work that's been occurring to try and improve from a staff experience perspective end of shift. You can see that in one of the slides around the average length of overrun, which has been on a downward trajectory, which is certainly to be welcomed, because from an experience perspective, the ability to finish work on time is clearly really important. It's a feature in our IMTP. Now, of course, there has been some improvement in the handover delay position, not enough, as we've already spoken about, but there's also been other actions that have been underway in terms of trying to reduce this. We'd like to go further, but nonetheless, I just wanted to draw out it's beginning to show, which is good.
Yeah, thank you. Do you think that, there's been a lot of recruitment and training, it's pretty much fully staffed now, isn't it? And you've got much more flexible rostering systems in 111 to match kind of, work patterns with demand patterns. Do you think that's had an impact?
It's certainly a component. I think that there are probably two other drivers. The first is, of course, the length of handover delay, but secondly would have been the additional actions that have been put into place following our period of industrial agreement and the non-pay agreements that were reached to try and enable more of our people in this very operationally constrained environment, more of our people to try and finish their shifts on time.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments on this item? I would just reflect on the sickness issue. I think, Rachel, you made the point that we were doing very well. And I think that from a reputational point of view, picking up, so I'm just pulling a few threads together here that Estelle was mentioning about reputation. I could just have this sense that, and I know from my fairly short but quite intense grilling with the minister on the appraisal times, that one of the highlights were, well, you're doing quite well with sickness when the downward trajectory, you were up at sort of 11-ish%, you're on your way to the 6%, you're kind of passing 8 and 7's in sight, and well done. Now it seems to have leveled, and I think that we might just need to think about how we manage that communication process, because as we go into a more difficult winter, as we go into all the issues that we've talked about, it may be that kind of success that we had last year of moving very clearly on a defined trajectory might not be replicated in the next few months. And we need to understand why that is. And we as a board, we've been hearing all sorts of reasons. I'm sure we do understand a lot of those reasons, but they need to be kind of collated and presented. And we as a group, the non-exec people who may well get those sort of agreements, need to really understand some of the issues, and even at the REAP levels and things, have an impact. And then the other people measures like training and stuff like that, they will always take a bit of a back seat if operationally there's huge pressure to get people out on ambulance, I suppose. So again, it's about us understanding, so somehow balancing, not an excuse, but you know what I mean, just understand the reality of the situation, the kind of cause and effect that goes on in trying to manage a workforce at a time of great stress. Andrew.
Yeah, it was just to say across the whole of the NHS Wales at the moment, not just us, there is this significant focus on sick absence anyway, as a result of obviously the pay deal and the reduction in unsociable hours to be paid after 1 week sick absence. So there is a sort of focus in terms of, does that have any impact in terms of seeing sick absence go up across the entire sector? So we are expected to obviously feed into that. And at the moment, what we're seeing across most of the NHS is there is a slight increase in sick absence more generally. Don't know if there's a correlation, but that is what we're seeing. So we are expected to feed into that. But I absolutely take your point. Our view is about making sure that we all understand our own situation. But, that level of confidence about hoping to see a downward trajectory, we remain optimistic because of all the measures, recognising some of these external influences as well.
Chair, I think to just contribute to this, because I think you're clearly right. If the levels remain stagnant, we're likely to be quizzed. But I think that there may be more value in us, instead of comparing to the rest of the NHS, which I don't think is comparable, is the value of benchmarking within the industry. And if perhaps we could have a mechanism through which we could pull those, recognising that it is reported differently, and I know that some may want to convince otherwise, but it is reported differently, but it does allow an industrial benchmarking. I think maybe there may be more value in that.
Good. Okay. I am just looking around. No. Okay. We're all good. Okay. So in that case, we take the report. We ask for further information if we need it, and remedial action. That's all done. Okay, if everyone's happy, we will move on. And Fish, you've been waiting patiently. Back to you for the amendments to standing orders and the financial instructions.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the annual review of the model standing orders, scheme of reservation, delegation and standing financial instructions, which is undertaken by Welsh Government. The last revision that we had was earlier last year. The amendments to the standing orders are primarily made because of the introduction of the new Health and Social Care Quality and Engagement Act, incorporating the Citizens' Voice body twice. And also there's a couple of helpful additions for us. One is reducing the time for the publication of our board papers from 10 days to 7 days. So that's very helpful. We've been in compliance with that, whereas the 10 days really was a historical time frame when we were posting packs out. So I'm pleased to see that we've got that on 7 days. And it also includes the new role of the Vice Chair, statutory role of the Vice Chair, and the additional voting Executive Director in standing orders. All the changes are marked up. The Audit Committee has reviewed these as well. Just also to say the standing financial instructions changes are very minor because they were quite substantial changes at the last round, so they're quite minor. Scheme of reservation and delegation similarly. There is one change in the standing financial instructions, just a change to a title. I think we had Director of Planning and it should be Executive Director of Strategy, Planning and Performance. So thanks, Paul, for pointing that out. So we'll make that change, but also just to say, just to foreshadow that there will be another amendment to the delegations to come in November, because it will be reflecting the changes to the new Executive Director of Paramedicine in that scheme as well, but it will be minor. So that's all of those changes. And as I said, the Audit Committee has reviewed them and endorsed them.
Okay. Did you want to say something, Martin, in terms of the Audit Committee having looked at
I'm
these?
sure everybody's read the 200 pages or thereabouts, sort of things.
Paul's read them, prove that.
No, I mean, most of the amendments, as Georgia said, they're more statutory changes that impact on our standing order. So no, nothing really of significance to bring to the board's attention, Chairman. Good,
thanks, Martin. Okay, so we're asked to approve the amendments, the documents, and just looking around to make sure everyone's content that we do. Looks as though we do, so that's grand. Good, thank you very much. Okay, happy? Good.
Thank you.
All right, so we move on now to the next little collection of items, item 15, with the board committee reports. We'll go in a slightly different order, if we may, because Hannah has to leave us at 12:30. And so, Hannah, if you're okay, we come to you first, so that you can give us anything you want to talk to us about in terms of academic partnership.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Chair. Much appreciated. I'll take the AAA report as read, but I just wanted to pick out a couple of highlights for you. So we met on the 15th of August, and as you'll see in the alert section, the one thing that we wanted to keep on your radar was that, as we've already discussed previously, as part of our application for university trust status, we are required to have a non-executive director from academia. Now, in line with our ambitions for the trust, we've broadened that out slightly, and in the draft recruitment pack, we are seeking a strong academic, commercial or innovation background, along with, of course, the usual skills and experience that you would expect somebody to have in order to fulfil the independent member role more broadly. In the advise section, there are a few interesting things, but I wanted to draw your attention to two of them. So the first is that at our last meeting, we were pleased to welcome the new national NHS Wales Research and Development Framework. What this does is it sets out in a really clear way what research excellence looks like throughout NHS organisations in Wales. And our research and innovation team at WAST were part of the group that co-created it, guided by Health and Care Research Wales. Now, I would say that the summary of this document, and the reason why I wanted to flag it up to you all as board members, is that, you know, research is everybody's business and everyone's responsibility. So one of the things that this challenges us to do is to think about how we have that visibility at board level. We've spoken a lot today, of course, about the hugely important role that research and evidence plays in all of the decisions that we make to give the best possible care to people. And this framework does a really nice job of guiding organisations to consider how that plays out across the different functions of an organisation. The next step for us is that we are now asked to complete a self-assessment against that framework ahead of our annual review meeting. Our research innovation team are completing that, but please do give them any assistance that they require if they're asking you for information, because we're looking to take a holistic organisational wide view of the ways in which we support and enable research. And the second thing is to commend to you the Research and Innovation Annual Report, which you will find in Annex 1. There is a great executive summary, which is about 2 pages long, and the bulk of the report is about 12 pages, so it's well worth a look. I'm a bit biased, having recently taken on the research champion role, but I would review it as a cracking good read, and it definitely demonstrates the recent Read review finding that Wales punches above its weight for research impact, and I think that's something to celebrate. To whet your appetite, we've got some interesting stats around the funded research studies that took place this year. We took part in 6, and together they attracted £5.5 million of funding, which is a huge achievement. These studies included a range of things. A couple that I thought were of particular interest were the 999 Respond study, which of course you'll know is focused on how to get critical care to the people who need it most. And there were a couple of different drone projects which have led into a partnership with Warwick University that will be trialling drone delivery of automated defibrillators during clinical trials. So lots going on. Please do have a look. And if you want to know more about any of those projects, there is a really useful annex at the end giving an overview of WAS's research activity in these areas. The only final thing to do then, Chair, is to thank members of the Academic Partnerships Committee. We're working really hard to address the 2 priorities that we have this year, which are about working towards achieving our university trust status, as we've been doing for a couple of years, and implementing and embedding our new research governance framework. So thanks very much all, and commend that to you.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Any questions or comments addressed to Hannah? Yes, Kerry.
Just one observation, actually, as I was reading these reports yesterday, Hannah, I was thinking about the opportunity for capacity building or more funding through the charity. So obviously we've successfully tapped into funding for research and for innovation, but for me it felt like there was future potential to join this up. I don't know whether it's ever been considered, and maybe we could take a conversation off the table to consider that maybe appropriate if you're struggling for funding in some areas of innovation, that the charity or a trust, a pot of money might help us to fund something that we're struggling to.
Yes, that would be great. And I think as part of the broader discussions that are carrying on, we would definitely be interested to look into that. Of the funding that I mentioned, a very small proportion was funding that was able to be allocated by WAST. So we have a little bit of internal funding in those ways, but it would be really interesting to think particularly around opportunities for partnership, around kind of innovation, and we've been considering sort of commercial involvement as well, but that's something that I think we see as being down the line. But yes, please, let's catch up and think about how we can combine these 2 elements to move forward with that.
Thank you very much. 2 hands went up during the course of that discussion, and that was from Andy and from Estelle. So Andy.
In terms of do we look at alternatives for how do we fund some of this activity, I'm up to all suggestions on that basis, whatever possible. But principally, each of these research, when we make the applications to try and win the research, the cost into delivery will be built in within that bid. Probably our biggest restraining factor is people to undertake the research itself, as opposed to the money to do it, and that's our biggest barrier to growing our portfolio extensively. Nigel, who's usually the principal applicant on all these, he's very good at winning the research bids. What we then struggle with is find sufficient capacity across the organisation for chief investigators, principal investigators to lead these studies, and that's probably the thing that holds us back more than anything.
That's interesting. And still.
Andy's covered most of what I was going to say. It was just that the governance around research monies and the reporting mechanisms. I mean, we're largely principal investigators on other people's research, if you like. So you look at an academic institution, they're looking for operational organisations to be able to then activate that research. So as Andy says, we've got the flow of colleagues in who want to undertake that research can be challenging. It's something to think about, I would say, given some of the issues currently being encountered in the charity, and obviously that's a trustee discussion rather than here. It's probably something that's a little bit further down the line, but happy to have an early conversation about that. But we wouldn't be ready currently, I think, to move in that direction.
And I think this is a great example of when we talk about research governance for the organisation as a whole, because as Andy said, the challenges in, for example, releasing staff for secondment to conduct particular areas of research or to come alongside the team for a while, which I believe, Andy, is how this has often been done previously. That obviously does apply to all of us in terms of thinking how do we prioritise the capacity needed for research, mindful, of course, that we face huge challenges and are having to make difficult decisions every day. So great to start that conversation today, and thanks very much for flagging that up, Andy.
Okay, thanks very much. Just a couple of things to add. Then there's one item that we as a board had to approve, and that is a change of personnel to the committee, I think, with Judith Price taking over from Lee. Is that right? All right, am I right on that? We have to approve that? Oh, it's the audit committee. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Okay, sorry. All right, we'll come to that in a moment. The other thing I was going to mention was that the recruitment for the academic stroke, industrial stroke, whatever, NED should hopefully go live in October. Looking at Trish, she's nodding positively. And yes, yeah, big yay there from Hannah. Can I just make a plea that it is difficult to recruit non-exec directors within the health sector as a whole. As we know, it's increasingly difficult in Wales as a geographical region to do it. So we have added difficulties piled upon difficulties. This is a very particular role that we need. Getting the academic or getting the university status application, this is an integral part of that process. So we really do want to succeed in finding the right person to do that, right person for the board and right person that meets our needs to get university status. So my plea is that for everybody around this table and anywhere that we know to stretch minds, stretch contacts, put arms out, reach out to people, because I think we're more likely to find somebody, attract somebody through individual connections whenever we are by putting an advert in somewhere or something on a website, which probably would go largely unnoticed by people who might actually be interested if somebody tapped them on the shoulder and had a conversation. So big plea that in October it's going to go live, and we need some applications. We need some people to come forward. Okay. All right. Thanks so much, Hannah. So we've done that bit, so we can go back to our standard agenda, which takes us to board committee reports from Quest, from Bevin. We've heard about obviously the high risks, but talk to us about the other bits from your committee's work.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a very detailed report, as everyone can see. I was going to draw attention to paragraph 1. I won't, given the earlier discussion. Paragraph 2 within the alert section, I think, is worth a mention. I know all committees have discussed the policy review process. So I just wanted to assure Trust Board today that we did agree and confirm the priority list of policies to be reviewed as those that are relevant to Quest. In the advice section, there's just a couple of things that I think are worth drawing out from this. The first one is paragraph 3, where we heard from Beth Hughes, palliative care paramedic, and she described to us her experience of attending and supporting a person with bowel cancer. The work of this team, and we've discussed the work of this team previously, certainly in Quest, and their ability to support ill people to remain within their own home or their own care setting is absolutely to be commended. The impact that they have on that person and their family's lives is very, very evident. And I just wanted to draw that out really, because the work is phenomenal. And the committee very much got quite animated in discussing that agenda item. The next one I want to draw Trust Board attention to is paragraph 5, which is around infection prevention and control. We received the annual report, which is attached to today's paper for board members. And what I wanted to say here is that this report really does demonstrate that we're on a journey here. We're on a very positive journey. And I certainly remember having a conversation probably about 2 years ago around the way that we manage and progress with our IPC processes. And it's very clear that we are developing a more consistent IPC culture across Trust Board. And again, I just want to thank everyone involved in that. I know it's not straightforward, but we did see there's a sustained level of improvement, and that was recognised. Paragraph 6, again, is referring to another annual report, safeguarding. Again, our report is attached here, and I would urge Trust Board members to read it if they haven't already. It does demonstrate we are reporting more and more, which we absolutely welcome because we see the need and the benefit of doing that. And Paul is the champion, Trust Board champion for safeguarding, was very quick in congratulating the staff for the way they approach this work. It can be very, very difficult and very emotive. In the assure section, there's detail here around the MIQPR. There's just one point I want to draw attention to, and that is with regards to the PTR. And the committee previously at its earlier meeting had raised an alert around the impact on staff and how they are feeling and having to deal with not just the volume of complaints and that, but the severity because of the challenges across the system that we've rehearsed well here today. I wanted to flag that the exec team are looking to review a proposed organisational change process with regards to this in order to support the teams better. And we have agreed that that will be provided to the next meeting in terms of an update. Paragraph 14, in our last committee review, we agreed that we would have a more robust approach to considering clinical indicators, and I was delighted to see at this meeting we did have our first report on the start of that process, and we had really quite a good discussion there. And one of the things that we flagged in that discussion was the improvement in ROS rates, which I know you drew attention to at the start of the meeting, Chair. Last but one then is paragraph 16, where we considered the proposed reporting process for the information security and information governance, and the committee did agree the set of metrics proposed. So we will have data coming forward to the committee in future on those. Finally, the risks, which I put here, but we have covered them earlier. So at that point, I'll stop and happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Bevin.
Thank you, Chair. Just an apology to the board. It looks as though the IPC, Infection Prevention and Control Annual Report, hasn't been uploaded. In fact, it's the Internal Audit Report that's been uploaded. So my apologies to you, Bethan, and to the board, and also to those who wrote the annual report. We will ensure that it's circulated to the board. We'll replace it and we'll make sure that it comes into the pack in November. So apologies there.
Thanks, Trish.
It is there, Trish.
I think. No, it's not.
No,
it's the audit report.
Ah, right. Wrong thing.
Easily confusing. Okay, fine.
Yeah, just kind of very aware when we take annual reports as well. I just want to put public acknowledgement to Nikki Harvey and Louise Colston. Nikki Harvey's our head of safeguarding, and Louise is our head of infection prevention control. And in both cases, the work that they do is incredibly important for our own organisation and for our own people. It's also incredibly important for our reputation in working with other partners across Wales. So I do commend both their annual reports. We are looking at how we present some of these reports. So you will see there are differences in style, and the intent is that we will see more of the annual reports looking much more like the safeguarding report as we go forward. So hopefully a more engaging and dynamic report which works for yourselves, but also for members of the public that read our papers. So specific acknowledgement to those individuals and their teams for the work that they do. And then secondly, just to follow up on Bethan's comment with regard to putting things right, and just to confirm that notwithstanding the huge pressures that we are experiencing across the NHS at the moment in Wales, and specifically the challenges we've talked about this morning for our own organisation, I'm very pleased to report to the board that the executive have given full support to the investment and the OCP required, which will mean that both Lee's team and mine will be able to, well, already started to move forward. We're intending to move at pace on this. So that work has already commenced, and we're already in consultation with staff for that OCP to be enacted.
Okay, good. Okay, thanks, Liam. I hear that. Yes, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. You reminded me just to clarify on that. So I was going to say something similar. Was that so we've been able to make that investment out of our contingency this year because of the position we're in, fortunately, and with the assumptions around the plan that we've made previously. The recurring cost again, we're committed to. So we've made the recovery commitment. We'll have to build that up as part of our financial plan for next year to recover it. But we were committed to do so. So it'll be part of our recurring cost pressures that we'll have to manage next year. But we recognise the importance of it. So that's why we've been able to make that commitment.
Good, thanks so much. Any other questions or comments to Bethan? Those two papers, the one that we've got and the one that we will get might be circulated for note, not for approval. So that's straightforward. So in that case, we'll move on to people and culture. And Paul, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Similar to Quest, it's a very detailed report. I just want to bring out a couple of issues if I can. The one important thing is that we need to approve the Welsh Language Standards Annual Report. Melvin is with us, so I don't know if you want to take that first, Chair.
Yes, good idea. Shall we ask Melvin if he's there? Are you hearing us?
Presented it at the People and Culture Committee bilingually, and he's just going to do the same here.
Okay.
Hello.
Good morning. So over to you there, Melvin. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Okay, right. So datblygiad pwysig yn ystod cyfnod adrodd ar gyfer adroddiad hwn oedd datblygu fframwaith iaith Gymraeg sydd wedi arwain at camau gweithredu yn ein cynllun tymor canolig integredig sy'n cynnwys cydymffurfiaeth a safon ar Gymraeg a gweithredu cynllun mwy na geiriau Llywodraeth Cymru. An important development during the reporting period for this report was the development of a Welsh language framework from which Welsh language deliverables are included in the IMTP, incorporating compliance with the Welsh language standards and delivering the Welsh Government's More Than Just Words action plan. O ran cydymffurfio ag ateb galwadau yn y Gymraeg, y cyfradd ateb ar gyfer gwasanaeth 111 oedd 18%. Yn ystod y cyfnod adrodd, profwyd heriau perfformiad sylweddol dros y gaea a gyfrannol tuag at y perfformiad i ateb galwadau Cymraeg a Saesneg. In terms of compliance in answering calls in Welsh, the answer rate for the 111 service was 18%. During this reporting period, the service experienced significant performance challenges in relation to unprecedented winter demand that contributed towards the performance in answering both Welsh and English language calls. Mae galwadau i'r gwasanaeth cludio cleifion wedi gynnwys yn yr adroddiad o ran ailunio ar set data a darparwyd gan gwasanaeth 111. Gwelwyd perfformiad da ar ateb galwadau Cymraeg gyda 98% yn cael ei hateb. Mae data ateb galwadau Cymraeg ar gyfer 111 ac ar gyfer y gwasanaeth cludio cleifion bellach yn dangosydd perfformiad allweddol lefel bwrdd yn yr adroddiad ansawdd a pherfformiad integredig misol. NEP's call data has been included in this year's report as to align itself with the data set provided by the 111 service. Good performance was seen with 98% of Welsh language calls answered. Welsh language call answering for 111 and NEPs are now a board level key performance indicator in the MIQPR. O ran cydymffurfio a deunydd coeddusrwydd a hysbysebu, lansiwyd ymgyrch gyfathrebu GIG 111 Cymru yn ddwyieithog trwy hysbysebion teledu a chyfryngau cymdeithasol i gynyddu ymwybyddiaeth o'r gwasanaeth. In terms of compliance with publicity and advertising material, an NHS 111 Wales communication campaign was launched bilingually via TV ads and social media to increase awareness of the service. Ynglŷn â chydymffurfiaeth a gwybodaeth ar y we i'r cyhoedd, datblygwyd 14 o wirwyr symptomau dwyieithog a chynyddu'r nifer sydd ar gael yn ddwyieithog i 65. Compliance with web-based information for the public saw 14 bilingual symptom checkers develop, an increase in the number of bilingual symptom checkers available to 65. O ran hybu'r Gymraeg, ar y 7 o Rhagfyr, fe wnaeth Bethan Evans, pencampwr y Gymraeg, ynghyd ag aelodau staff dathlu diwrnod hawliau'r Gymraeg drwy fideo hyrwyddo a ddangoswyd ar ein cyfryngau cymdeithasol. In terms of promoting the Welsh language, on the 7th of December, the Trust Board's Welsh language champion, Bethan Evans, along with staff members, marked Welsh Language Rights Day by a promotional video that was promoted on the Trust's social media platforms. Yn ystod y cyfnod adrodd, derbynwyd 5 cwyn yn ymrywio o ddeliau gohebydd allanol, neges ffôn y gwasanaeth cludio cleifion a gwybodaeth ar gyfeiriadur gwefan 111. During the reporting period, 5 complaints were received, which ranged from dealing with external correspondence, NEP's call messaging, and information on the 111 website directory of service. Y blaenoriaethau ar gyfer y flwyddyn hon, Fydd gweithredu fframwaith y Gymraeg a'r camau gweithredu o fewn y cynllun tymor canolig integredig. Bydd gwaith yn parhau ar ffrwd waith Cymraeg benodol fel rhan o gynllun gweithlu strategol yr ymddiriedolaeth i sicrhau bod y defnyddwyr y gwasanaeth yn derbyn y gwasanaethau yn ei dewis iaith. Mwyn ateb y galw ar gos blynyddol am gyfieithu, byddwn nhw'n canoli ein gwaith cyfieithu. Rydym wedi recriwtio cyfieithydd Kate Evans a dechreuodd weithio ni ar y 10 o Awst. The priorities for this year will be implementing the Welsh language framework and its deliverables within the IMTP. My work will continue on a dedicated Welsh language workstream as part of the overall WAS strategic workforce plan in ensuring that our service users receive services in their language of choice. And finally, in order to meet the increasing demand and cost for translation, we will be centralising our translation work and have recruited a translator, Kate Evans, who started work for the Trust on the 30th of August. And that concludes my summary of the annual report. Diolch. Thank you.
Thank you, Melvin. Diolch. Paul, back to you.
Yeah, diolch Melvin, and the committee recognised the huge amount of work that Melvin himself individually puts into ensuring that we meet those standards, and he drives forward with Bethan, he drives forward that agenda, and we're very grateful for that work that he's done. It's the first time it's been presented bilingually, and I think that demonstrates that our commitment to the Welsh language standards. Some of the issues that he's picked up during that annual report, I know Lee and his performance team are looking at the metrics around call handling in Welsh, and that will be again monitored through Lee's team, but also come through to the P&C committee as well. So the board is asked to approve that submission of the Welsh language annual standards report. Are you happy to do that?
Okay, so just checking, everybody content to approve that? We are, yes. And you want to say yes,
please,
in Welsh?
Yes,
please. Melvin, I just wanted to thank Melvin publicly here, really, because he's been a one-man band, and this hasn't been an easy task. And I'm looking at Trish because she's been very involved in it as well. And, you know, his determination and resilience, I think, in supporting us to move forward and sometimes pulling us to move forward, because I'm very lucky. I'm a member of the Welsh Language Working Group as well, and the energy and enthusiasm in that group, really, and the commitment from individuals, a very small group of people, to make these improvements is commendable. So diolch yn fawr, Melvin and Popeth. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, do you want to? No, okay. Okay, anything else you want to add?
Okay, just a couple of things from the committee, nothing else to add on the Welsh language. On the alert section, we've already talked, Bethan talked about policies. We did the same thing at P&C. So we agreed the priority list, and whilst audit committee will have the oversight of the policy renewals, we will obviously be monitoring the ones in P&C. On the advice section, just a couple of things to pull out. It's a very detailed element of the report. Sexual safety story, I think that the BBC work that was done reporting, I think that we've had a very positive response generally. We have had an increase in people raising issues, which is good. That's the whole point of this. And we have started the foundation of the Speaking Up Safely programme with 3 guardians already in post. Challenges in partnership working, we've recognised that there have been challenges in partnership working with our trade union colleagues, but I think the committee was at pains to say that we've got a good basis for that partnership working, and at the crux of it, there's a lot of confidence in the partnership working, although there are some tricky issues that we are having to deal with. And when you look at the WASP report that came to committee, you can see the breadth of information that's coming from there. We agreed the People and Culture Plan metrics have been approved now, so we'll be monitoring them. And as I said earlier, we did a deep dive into stress-related absence and actually identified that it's a very broad issue. It's not easy to pinpoint what's causing stress and anxiety to our members of staff, whether that's within work or outside work. But we looked at what do we wrap around those individuals to enable them to improve their mental health and stress. We also had a new report that came to the committee, which is on cultural themes and trends. There were a few adjustments we suggested to those that report, and we'll watch that, and we'll receive that biannually. And it's looking at how do we actually demonstrate that our people and culture plan is delivering and pushing us forward in terms of the culture. On the assure element, we spent a lot of time in the committee on volunteers. It was a really good committee meeting, I think, on the volunteer strategy, how that's developed and enhanced. And if you remember, we'd asked for that because of the change of role of volunteers that we recognised. And we had a great gentleman called Ian Cross, who was a volunteer driver. He came to give his story at the committee, and it was inspiring, that story, about what he does. He still works. He does this in his spare time. He's got his dog in the back. It was a really humorous but very energetic, and yeah, it was an inspiring story, and we thanked Ian. He's recently been awarded the British Empire Medal, and he suggested some areas for improvement as well, which I know Lee has picked up in terms of that story. So yeah, it was great to have Ian at that meeting. And then we've talked about the Welsh Language Standards Annual Report, and we approved that and recommended it for the board approval. So there's lots of others. We looked at the risks, which we've already talked about. There were lots of other areas of importance in that AAA report, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Any questions or comments to Paul? All very straightforward. Thank you very much. In that case, we'll move on to the Finance and Performance Committee. So, Joe, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Again, a very detailed report. We've got one item for approval, which I'll come to shortly, but I'll just pick out a couple of key points in the report. I don't plan to go through it every single point, but the first one on the alert section about the 5.7 million and the additional 100, I'm glad that's been sorted out, something that we've discussed ongoing, but it seems to be on the right track where it's been approved. Then also, I think everyone's heard in the news about the concrete, the rack concrete, and the issues it's causing. Thankfully, a detailed kind of analysis has been done in inspection by WAST, and then we have no concerns for the buildings that we own, and the ones that have been shared as well. They've been looked at, but thankfully there's no issues there. In the alert section, one thing I wanted to mention is at point 7. We had a section, every committee has a section then at the end about reflections, and it's noted that some attendees don't attend all the meetings because they're dependent on the paper. But sometimes, there's a lot of work that goes in there. They attend and we kind of go through the paper very quickly, and they don't have a huge amount of input or they don't have a huge amount of interaction. So we just wanted to be clear. That doesn't mean that the paper hasn't been read or anything. It's sometimes that some papers, topics have a bit more discussion and questions than others, but we are mindful. We made a point of making a note of this in the meeting, that everyone who attends presents a paper. It's appreciated how much work goes into putting the papers together, getting the information, presenting it on time, and we are mindful of that and thankful that they assist. And just because questions don't get asked or not as many, that's no way that we're kind of disregarding the paper. And then for the assure section, just on the finance, we're on track to break even as it stands, so that's going well. And then finally, the IMTP has now been approved by Welsh Government, which is something that we've talked about previously. So going back up to the one item that needs approval is the sustainability report. And Chris will just mention a couple of points on this. It is attached to the AAA report.
Thank you, Joe. Just to add to this then, so again, the committee meeting, we had a detailed paper and a presentation on not just this, but wider decarbonisation, sustainability, and wider environmental matters. This obviously forms part of that and is something that the board is asked to approve today. Part of that conversation and discussion, and you'll see from the paper, is some of the challenges we face around being able to provide a like-for-like comparison and trends for some of this going forward, given elements that are outside of our control, changes in the basis and reporting requirements from a government level. Now, as I say, that's outside of our control, and that is something which everybody across NHS Wales, given it's a Welsh Government requirement to report in this way, will have similarly in their reports. But what I wanted to just highlight very, very quickly was I didn't want that to hide some, to mask some of the improvements we are making. And don't get me wrong, we've got a long, long way to go in this space. But I think what's interesting, if you look at the table on page 11, table 3, just to highlight, we are starting to see some return on investments that we are making in this space, particularly around fleet fuel. So some of the moves we've done to more efficient vehicles, including as much electrification as we can in terms of plug-in hybrids so far, rather than fully electric car-based responses, have started to see some return. And also in terms of the way in which we're sort of heating and cooling and lighting some of our facilities, our electricity and gas footprint, which is directly linked to the installation of a number of sites for PV panels now, and where possible, sort of air source heat pumps and alternative sources in that sense. Now, the numbers are small, but I think what we need to put that in context as well is that it wouldn't have been a surprise to see an increase over a period of time, actually, because we've got more people, we've got more demands on our service, we've got more vehicles, we've got more buildings we're working out of. So you need to see it in that context as well. To actually see even a small reduction is an achievement in itself. And obviously, like I said, not to say that we haven't got a long, long way to go in this space. So that was all I was going to just pull out in terms of the report. As I say, it is a requirement from government that it gets amalgamated essentially within the annual report for last year, and it is approved by the board, and it was recommended that the board does so at the committee.
Okay, thank you very much. So just to formally ask, are we all content to approve that sustainability report? Yes, we are. Good. Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, just one other thing then. Can I just add something on the back issue, just to add again to that, and as part of that presentation, that position was confirmed again through to committee, and we've provided further updates for the government on that. And it's an interesting one because obviously this is something that the team have been working on for at least 2 years with colleagues in shared services and across NHS in Wales Estate colleagues. But obviously, given the recent attention on it, just for board awareness, is that the current assurances and the current position we've got is based on a very detailed survey and inspection where required on our sites from a sort of quantity surveyor-led perspective. Given the recent attention, we have now been asked and are in the process of getting that sort of further reconfirmed, if you like, from a structural engineering perspective. Now, I'm not expecting that to throw out anything different than what the previous sort of analysis and surveying of the estate did. If it did, obviously we report that back and have to manage it. But as I say, it's an interesting dynamic given some of the changes or some of the more media attention on it, on something which we've been working on for a long time. So just about that extra level of assurance, but also awareness that there's another layer of assurance from a structural engineer perspective that is ongoing and is due to be completed by the end of October.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Anything else, Drogo, to add? All done?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and no more questions, so that's grand. Good. Okay. So moving on, we did the academic partnership one, so we come to the audit committee, and the issue I trailed inadvertently about approval, so we can do it properly this time. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few things to bring to the board's attention. So I'll go to the alert section first. I mean, the standing orders were approved earlier in this meeting, but as you can see, there's a recommendation from the audit committee that the trust board does approve them. The second one is another issue that requires the board's approval, and that's a change in membership of the committee. This is for Judith Bryce, the assistant director, to formally replace Lee on the committee. So obviously that was agreed as a recommendation to this meeting today. So do you want to take that?
We might as well take that while we're at it. Does anybody wish to object? Question? Can I assume we're all in favour of that? We are. Okay, so that's approved.
So let me move you on to paragraph 8, just draw your attention to that. There are 3 items there, the Audit Wales update. One was the unscheduled care. It's just about to start. It is disappointing but I think this was flagged up, I don't know, a year, 18 months maybe ago, and it's only now they're starting it. I guess it's a big piece of work, and we probably won't see the outcome of that work until the summer of next year. It certainly won't be in time for implementation if there are any recommendations to be made for this winter, but nonetheless, just to note that. The workforce planning, the assessment of workforce risks, that's another piece of work that's being undertaken by the Audit Wales Committee. So it's quite interesting to see where that goes in due course. And the last one is the structured assessment. So we're expecting to see something both for this committee and indeed for all Wales, I guess, sometime in November. I didn't intend saying anything else, Chairman, other than to note that at the committee, we receive a lot of papers, as you guessed, from a lot of the other committees, I guess, from external audit, internal audit, and from a lot of people who support the committees here, like today's meeting. And we drew attention to the fact that those papers are very well presented. They're put together, there's a lot of work goes into them. And the work of the Audit Committee, like many other committees, is made that much easier by the fact that these papers are so well presented. So a big thanks went out to the staff. There's some here today, Alex, and there's quite a few other people. I shouldn't mention names, I guess, because you're invariably going to miss somebody when you do that. But just to make that point, and I think you made the point as well, Yoga, in your committee. So that was the only thing that I wanted to draw to the attention of today's meeting. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Martin. Any questions, Martin? With that, good. All right. So moving on, then we come to the last few items. Really, governance report. Trish, it's for note. Do you want to make any comments?
Nothing.
Okay. All right. So I'm assuming nobody wishes to answer a question on that. So we note that governance report. Item 17 are the minutes of the various board committees, which are all attended, and they're all for note as well. Item 18, NHS Wales Joint Committee update reports. Similarly, just pausing to make sure no one's got any questions or comments. Nope. Closing items then. Any other business? I've got no indications of any other businesses, so I think we haven't got any of those. Date of next meeting is in Thursday, the 23rd of November. Back here again, as normal now. So all that remains then is the final resolution to exclude members of the press and the public, because we're going to go into the private section after our lunch break. So thanks very much. Can I say thank you to Melvin, if he's still here? I don't know whether he's still on the screen, but thank you for attending today and speaking to us as you have done. Thanks also to Sharon, who's standing in today for Damon. So good to see you here. So that's grand. Thanks to everybody else for your attendance. And let's take a short lunch break. We're doing our own lunch, aren't we, today? So it's half an hour. We might as well try and start a bit earlier. So why don't we try and get back for the closed session at, say, 1:20? Will that be okay for everybody? 1:20, closed session. Okay, let's do that.